Looking forward to our thing in a few weeks.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll end up being there, but I'm hoping to. To. It's been.
What do you guys? You guys have like a liberal cuddle party, or what are you doing?
Yeah. Larry takes a bunch of MDMA, and we all sort of go into the corner and hang out together.
God, that sounds incredible.
Liberalism is wonderful, man. You should.
Oh God. Oh, they brought him onto this show. Oh my God. Or wait. No. Wait, am I mixing people up? Are these similar? Or am I losing my mind here? Are these not the same guy? It is the same. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. No, I was... Wait, oh, yeah. I was really worried for a second. Like, wait a second. They just didn't stick his name in the title? David Sachs, Larry Summers, and Ezra Klein. Ouch. Okay.
To the corner and hang out together.
God, that sounds incredible.
Liberalism is wonderful, man. You should come try it.
That's not liberalism. It's called something else, Ezra. Sorry, Nikki, is our CryptoZar joining us or no?
He's, I'm talking to now. It looks like he is.
Oh, zing. This is going to be great.
This would be like ratings bonanza.
All right.
It's his channel? Is it? Oh, I don't know who the All In podcast is. Is that Chamath's thing or whatever?
We do have David Sachs here. David, make sure you have a quick time on.
Look at Saxy Poo looking so presidential.
This may be a dumb question, but I generally wonder why you have an easy time dissociating Israel, the country, from the war crimes they commit, like the bombing of WCK workers or the IDF supporting violent settlers, but not with Russia. I don't even understand the question. I don't even know how to compute this question. Why do you have an easy time dissociating Israel, the country, from the war crimes? I don't have an easy time. I think they should be held responsible for it. And then same thing with Russia. Oh, I'm so sorry. Hold on. I was interpreting this like it was a real question. But you're doing the binary. If there's a bad thing from a side I don't like, we should never support them. And then you're wondering why I don't support Russia, but I would support Israel. Gotcha. My bad. I understand. Okay.
He looks thin, doesn't he?
Oh, he looks fabulous.
All right, here we go. 3, 2.
Let your winners ride.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah.
Rain Man David Sachs.
And instead, we open source it to the fans, and they've just gone crazy with it.
Love you guys. Queen of Quinoa.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 podcast in the world.
I feel welcome.
I'm your host, Jason Calacanis, with my besties, Chamath Palihapitiya, our chairman dictator, and live from, well, the administration, Mr. David Sachs, our czar for AI and crypto. And amazingly, two fantastic guests this week. We have New York Times writer and host of the Ezra Klein podcast. He's got a new book with Derek Thompson, Abundance. And he co-founded Vox in 2014. And he's our guest here today before Trump ships him to El Salvador. Please welcome Ezra Klein. How are you, sir?
Glad to be here in my final hours of freedom.
Okay, great. Good to be here. Sorry, Sachs. And with us, of course, Larry Summers, economist, former Treasury Secretary under Clinton, former director of the National Economic Council under Obama, and the president of Harvard from 2001 to 2006. Thanks for coming, Larry.
Good to be with you.
Okay, we have a lot to get to here, so we might as well talk about the big news of tariffs. It's day 80 of the Trump presidency, a second presidency, his second term, and Trump tweeted that he paused tariffs for everyone but China on Wednesday. Basically, let me just cue up the details, Larry, and then we'll get your take on all of this. Just 1 week after Liberation Day, Trump announced on Truth Social that, in effect, he was raising tariffs against China 125% based on their lack of respect, quote unquote, instead of negotiating, and that he was pausing reciprocal tariffs on all other countries for 90 days. And markets ripped 10% after he posted this. And today, Thursday, when we tape, there's been a massive sell-off on Wall Street, so the roller coaster ride continues. What it will be on Friday when you consume this podcast is anyone's guess. S&P is down 5% today. For context, the S&P was at 5,700 pre-Liberation Day, so about a 9% drop after these wild swings. And in fact, this has been historic volatility. Here are the top sell-offs in history. As you can see, three of them came during Black Monday in 1987. 3 of them came during the financial crisis. 3 of them came during COVID. And coming in 11th is Trump's
Did you guys see the there was a big tweet or something today? What was it? Where the Democrats shut down the world during COVID. Everybody forgets that Trump was president throughout all of that. Nobody remembers that Donald Trump was the president. It's an insane rewriting of history. How is it possible? How do they get away with it?
Tariffs. Also, in the gainers, you have these big rebounds. Wednesday's 9.5% recovery was number 3. The administration says this was all part of a master plan. We'll hear more about that later. And that they laid a trap for China. They laid a trap. Besant has been the spokesperson during this retreat, or whatever we're going to call the pause. And, quote, this was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along. I don't think we need to play the clip. That's the gist of it. The White House account then tweeted in all caps.
Bit of a side tangent, but important to understanding the billionaire hysteria. Why do you think no one was able to provide even basic policy prescriptions to counter money in politics other than a wealth tax? I think there is something there, but nobody seems capable of expressing in with any nuance. Well, I can tell you the reason. The reason is very simple, is because if you come at tax policy as a way to punish somebody as opposed to a way to raise revenue, well, then your goals are going to be oriented around optimal punishment as opposed to optimal revenue raising. So this is one of my big criticisms for how that conversation is centered, is that people think of really good ways to deprive billionaires of wealth. It's like a wealth tax is a really effective way to fuck over really, really, really high level or high wealth owning people to dispossess them of their wealth. But it doesn't raise very much revenue for the government. It's not a very effective tax, and it's very difficult to use. But for people that talk about wealth taxes, they're not thinking in terms of how can I raise revenue for the government. They're just thinking in terms of how can I punish billionaires, right? But this is like part of the whole reason why I don't like that framing of the billionaire thing, right?
Apps, my favorite way to tweet. Do not retaliate and you will be rewarded. Wall Street Journal, on the other side, posted a story about why Trump blinked. They chronicled the decision as being affected by Jamie Dimon, who went on Fox to express fears of recession while saying the tariffs were valid and that he knew the Trump and
Oh, it was this right here. From Joey Salads, this guy. Democrats shut the entire world down for 2 years over a cold, but they can't handle a few days of tariffs. The clowns are trying to rewrite history. Lockdowns are good unless you can blame them on Trump. Good one. Also, wait, quick meme. Melina claims Nick threatened her with financial abuse to sign an NDA. Uh-oh.
The same, since the party separation, Nicholas has requested that Melina sign a non-disclosure agreement, release a joint statement regarding their separation, and treatment, and threaten to diminish the value of the community estate and any businesses interest if Melina is unwilling to accept the terms for the dissolution of the estate. This is like, god damn. God damn. What? What?
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
I know you looking at this and you're like, holy shit. Is this true? Did he really threaten her? Like, look, bitch, you gonna sign this NDA? Or I'm not gonna stream anymore.
Fuck. I don't know. I don't have access to court documents because I don't really care that much. No, actually, I kind of do. It's kind of juicy, I guess. I don't know. Maybe we'll go over it. So, I mean, I would say this cautiously because I haven't gone over them. However, when you're filing a motion or when you're putting something in a complaint, you can put whatever you want. But you also, at some point, the two parties are going to have to start providing evidence for it. You can write whatever you want in a complaint. Doesn't mean it's true. But it could be that she's attached affidavits to substantiate this claim. I have no idea. I haven't seen what's in this case. So anybody can put whatever they want in any motion or any complaint. It doesn't mean it's true or not.
Cabinet will be watching him on Fox. Other banking executives who felt they didn't have a lot of influence in this administration, according to the Wall Street Journal, started lobbying Republican lawmakers.
If Trump passed away in his sleep of a heart attack, of course, is J.D. Vance better or does the circus continue? I honestly have no idea. I don't like Vance at all. I think Vance could be more dangerous. I think there's a decent possibility of that.
that the Trump tariff plan would tank the economy. The White House Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, started receiving calls from executives and lobbyists expressing concerns. And the Wall Street Journal reports that Trump was influenced heavily by Bessent. They were flooded with worried calls from Wall Street and that the president was lobbied to find an off-ramp. Trump ultimately relied on his instincts, according to the administration. Larry, is this 4D chess or is this something else? What are your thoughts?
This is dangerous work with a sledgehammer on a pretty sensitive machine, which is the global economy, that's having really serious consequences. First, it's important to understand that there's more tariffs that are around than you described. Even after the big back off, there's a 10% across the board tariff, a range of structural tariffs like on steel and automobiles, and a range of new tariff threats like on pharmaceuticals. Here's a kind of market-based estimate of what the damage that the market thinks this is all doing to the US.
Oh, true, actually. You're absolutely true. Thank you. Neo Destiny 2 and Kick Chat. The difference is that nobody in Congress is afraid of Vance and will go against him because he can't primary them. That might be the case. Vance might be more tactical and might be more destructive in terms of what he would enact on the United States as a way to circumvent rule of law, but he doesn't have the cult that Trump has in order to be effective. That is true. Wait, let me use the restroom real quick. Hold on one second.
U.S. economy is. Markets down, let's take today's number, 9%. If that's right, that would be about $4 trillion. Of course, at $4 trillion since Liberation Day, of course, markets were down coming into Liberation Day because of some anticipation of these policies. So let's be conservative and say these policies have taken $6 trillion off the stock market. Now, the stock market only measures the adverse impact on corporate profits, not the adverse impact on workers, not the adverse impact on consumers. So you need to add to that stock market number. One way of thinking about adding to it would be to say that corporate profits were 10% of the economy. So you could argue for multiplying by a factor of 10, but maybe that's being too exaggerating or too bold. So let's multiply by.
Fuck. Okay, I'm sorry. Which guy is talking? Who is this guy? Should I know who this is? Is this Larry Summers or is this the evil Sachs guy? I don't know what these people look like. Larry Summers. Do we like Larry Summers? Former Federal Reserve head. Oh, so he's a smart guy? Because he just said something I don't know if I agree with. The stock market only measures corporate profits. The stock market is going to be a proxy on a whole bunch more than just that. That's a very fundamental, basic, not true view of the
stock market number. One way of thinking about adding to it would be to say that corporate profits were 10% of the economy. So you could argue for multiplying by a factor of.
Over longer terms, he means. Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay.
10.
Sorry.
But maybe that's being too exaggerating or too bold. So let's multiply by a factor of 5. And what you get is a loss in the $30 trillion range as the present value, as estimated by markets, of what's being done. Now, I know the Trump administration sometimes likes to say it's working for Main Street, not Wall Street. I noticed that they're pretty excited about the stock market rally yesterday.
Yep, they do that. Remember, stock market falls, so no one cares about the stock market. Stock market rises. I've said this for years, but everybody knows this too. The indicators don't matter if they're bad, and if they are good, then they're the most important thing in the world.
In a way that wouldn't really go with not caring about markets. So I think what markets are seeing what's true, which is 3 things. This is an inflation shock because you're adding to prices. CEO of Amazon got it right. The Secretary of the Treasury got it wrong. Increases in tariffs of this magnitude, the overwhelming part of them will be passed on to consumers. So you've got an inflation shock. When you raise the prices of people and their income, at least in the short run, is the same, they're poorer. And that means they can afford less stuff. And that pushes the economy down. And so you've got higher inflation, and you've got less demand, and therefore more unemployment. All of that's bad for the economy and companies. And the last thing, which I think is profoundly important, is we are trading like an emerging market country right now. For serious countries, for the United States, the pattern is that when the world gets riskier, the bonds go down in yield and the currency goes up in value because people come for the safe haven.
Real quick. So what he's saying there is important to understand. When the market gets riskier, so there's more volatility, and people are looking to park their money somewhere safe, people look to buying treasury bonds because the United States dollar is considered an incredibly safe investment, right? So there's a couple of like really good knock-on effects that I've never even considered before. But like if the world is risky, if there's weird stuff going on, the United States can deficit spend in a way that is easily fundable because more people buying more treasury bonds means that the interest rates on those will go down so we can issue debt for cheaper. It's good for us, generally speaking. Yeah. This idea around like people looking to park money in safe places was also a huge driver in the housing market collapse, is because for the first time you had something that was seen as like, oh my God, I can buy mortgages in the United States. It's basically a US Treasury bond. It's almost as safe as that, and the returns are higher. And it was one of the huge drivers for why people were selling so many mortgages, why so many people were selling investment products and derivatives based on those mortgages, et cetera. It was the whole world was parking money into these CDOs. And it's why that was a global financial catastrophe. And it's why it wasn't just about houses or whatever. People say that. It was more financial. The housing market collapse, in my uneducated opinion, didn't really have much to do with the housing market. It had to do more with financial markets and global finance, I would say. But
when you're a country like Argentina, then the assets all move together. Falling stock prices go with higher bond yields, go with a weakening currency. And so because of our erratic behavior,
Destiny, it was regulatory. Yes, it was regulatory. Of financial markets. Thank you, Metalloid. Yes.
Have changed the zeitgeist surrounding America from the traditional zeitgeist surrounding America to the kind of zeitgeist that surrounded Juan Perón's Argentina. And that goes with all the other things that are happening. The more protectionism, denying the independence of the central bank, fiscal irresponsibility, breakdown of traditional boundaries between government and business, substantial cronyism as a strategy, authoritarian tendencies towards the opposition, lack of total respect for the judiciary.
Keep going, Larry. Keep
what
going.
we're seeing is a pattern of America being governed on the kind of Juan Perón Argentina model. And that sometimes produces some benefits for some people in the short run. That sometimes generates popularity for it. Perón kept coming back in Argentina, but ultimately it's extremely costly for a society.
You've heard Larry's take on all of this.
Larry's giving it about a B+ on the Harvard grade scale.
Which might be inflated, I'm not sure. Sachs.
Wait, does this Chamath, does he normally do podcasts with really smart people? Why is he such a fucking retard? Somebody explain this to me.
Obviously, in the administration, you cover two things, AI and, of course, crypto. And you're a member of the pod, so let's get your take on what happened this week with these tariffs. Even the most ardent supporters of Trump have felt this is chaotic, not well executed, not communicated well. What's your take, Sachs, on how this was executed, and could this have been
the Sachs guy might not be smart. Larry Summer guy seemed like he knows his shit.
done better?
Well, I think what happened, if you go back to Liberation Day was only 8 days ago, it was April 2nd. If I had told you on April 1st that Donald Trump would find a way to get the entire world to eagerly embrace a 10% tariff on the American market.
Nobody is eagerly embracing this. You sellout stooge fuck. You absolute fucking retard. Holy shit.
And not only would they not complain, but they'd actually be relieved.
Really? No one's complaining? Everybody feels relieved? People are still having discussions about what new trade deals would be in the United States. Carney in Canada has said that Canada is going to be leaving the United States and is looking for a new order in how things, like, seriously?
It's only 10%. You would have said that would be an April Fool's joke. If I had told you 8 days ago or 9 days ago that Trump would find a way to accelerate the United States' decoupling from China, which is something he's long wanted to do, and that Wall Street would basically breathe a sigh of relief over that, you would have said that there's no way that could happen.
No, everybody would agree that you can make people love living in huts if you nuke their cities and build the huts afterwards. Nobody in the planet would say that, like, oh yeah, like, of course people are going to enjoy a reprieve from some of the worst shit you could possibly do. Yeah, that's incredibly predictable. What are you talking about?
If I had told you 8 or 9 days ago that President Trump figured out a way to assert a presidential power in a way that gives America extraordinary leverage over virtually every country in the world, you would have said, well, I don't believe it. I don't, what is that power? And he proceeded to do that. And now basically every country in the world, except for China, is coming to Washington seeking to negotiate a new trade deal for the United States.
Yeah, when we're going to negotiate those, right? Are you guys excited for the 150 new bilateral trade agreements that the United States is going to negotiate?
Better terms for the U.S.
If you told me any of that a few days ago, I would have believed you, and I would have thought the consequences would be a substantially deteriorated American economy and a substantially less secure
I don't think we know
United
that.
States.
I don't think we know that.
It's not any surprise. There's nothing surprising about the fact that the United States has the power to extort Lesotho.
Yes.
It's just, and that's a country that was singled out in the Trump formula for the highest level of protection. There is no surprise in that. There is no surprise that the United States has the capacity to isolate itself from China. It will be very, very costly.
Japan's coming to Washington. South Korea is coming to Washington.
You don't think we already had deals with Japan? Do you think that these people have just... Do we have no trade deals in the history of the United States? It was not like this is the first time ever we've gotten trade deals with countries before. Like, hello?
Everybody's going to try to cut
Everyone's going to come to Washington.
It never would have occurred to anyone with experience in government that the United States would have any difficulty getting any major country to come send a representative to the United States to have a discussion and a negotiation with a United States on a matter that was of concern to the United States.
Larry, why
never
didn't they?
could possibly have come as any surprise.
Let me let Sachs
Why
reply to
didn't
that.
they? They did. They have been.
To bring you in, Sachs, go ahead. You reply.
Then why didn't they, Larry? Do you think that all these countries were going to renegotiate their trade deals with the U.S. if President Trump asked nicely, if he said, pretty please, let's renegotiate our trade deals so you take
Yes, we're the United States of America. What do you mean? That's the whole point of threatening an act. You could do that too. You just ramp it up. What? Like, again, they cast the U.S. as so weak. You think people are going to want to fucking negotiate anything with the little old United? Yeah, we're the United States of America. We have the largest fucking economy in the world. What?
down your trade barriers, that they would have done it. If he had said pretty please with a cherry on top, that's not the way these things work. He had to establish the leverage in the negotiation first. And the fact of the matter is he's the first president in decades who's been willing to do that. You don't get anywhere by just asking nicely. And I think that what President Trump did over the last 8 days is A, establish the leverage, and B, get all these countries to now want to negotiate a new trade deal with the United States.
If this is such a terrific thing, why do markets think it's so terrible for the American economy? Maybe the market's just completely wrong, but at least another possibility is that the market's judging this. That the market, job of markets is to look forward. It's to look past the immediate. It's to see what the long-run consequences are going to be. And markets are making a pretty devastatingly negative judgment.
Not true. Not true. Larry, that's not true. That feels emotional and nice, but it's just not accurate. So let's just establish a couple facts about quote-unquote the markets.
Look forward. Is
the question
that the market's judging this. That the market, job of markets is to look forward. It's to look past the immediate. It's to see what the long-run consequences are going to be. And
okay, yes, this is smart. Efficient market hypothesis is incorporating a ton of information. Yes.
Markets are making a pretty devastatingly negative judgment.
Not true. Not true. Larry, that's not true. That feels emotional and nice, but it's just not accurate. So let's just establish a couple facts about quote unquote the markets. Number one, there are two markets and they behave totally differently and sometimes inversely to each other. There's the stock market and there's the bond market. With respect to the stock market, what they are debating, and you're right, Larry, is what is the effective long-term rate of return a dollar needs to generate in order to pay me back that dollar. That is what the fundamental stock market does. And what we have seen for many years with trade imbalances, trade deficits, and close to zero interest rates, of which more of that happened under Democrats and Republicans, we have allowed the stock market to inflate past historical averages. What we've actually seen happen in the last week is what most people would call mean reversion. The stock market is still way above where it was last.
This is a cringe take. If you want to talk about a correction in the markets, he is right in that our stock market has ran pretty hot for quite a while, I think. Our stock market has ran hot. However, if a correction would have happened out of just, natural, ordinary economic activity, he's right that people would have said, well, it's a correction. We probably needed to cool off. Things might have been a little bit overvalued. But that's not why the markets are reacting the way they are right now. We have a very particular event that just happened, which was the United States president pushing the nuclear war button on global trade. So you can't use that. Whether you're right or not, we can't know now. We have no idea if this correction is organic or if things were overvalued. We have no clue because the market is not reacting to a simple overvaluation of all these companies. It's reacting to a fundamental trade, a fundamental difference in how all of these firms will operate, like things that are literally impacting cash flows and revenues and everything. It's not just a market correction on overvaluation.
Year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, what has happened is that the forward multiples have compressed. So that's number one. That's a fact. You can debate whether that's bad or good, and I'm willing to debate that with you.
Okay, now let's go to bonds. Yeah.
And then with respect to bonds, what we are seeing now is there are two very complicated issues. And we don't know what the unknown known is. And let me be very specific. In the last 2 days, we saw one part of the bond market totally get out of whack. And what we know is that the yields changed materially in a very acute way, which is atypical of how the bond market typically digests a philosophical change in approach to policy. Normally, when you see an acute reaction in the bond market, the underlying reason tends to be some financial calamity in a participant. What we heard in the last 24 hours is a lot of this move may have been attributed to an enormous levered bet on U.S. treasuries by a Japanese hedge fund. It will take 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 weeks for us to really know.
I think you have to be careful because if I'm understanding the claim here, I hate this fucking piece of shit. I hate this piece of shit because he sounds like he actually is smart. He sounds like he actually does understand not just the concepts, but how they connect, which is very fucking annoying because he says a lot of really retarded shit when I see him talking in other places, okay? So global finance and everything is a weak area of mine, okay? So like I'm not gonna have a ton of answers here. But when he makes the argument that historically global volatility doesn't lead to an acute change like this in U.S. treasuries, okay? Acute meaning a short-term, instant, like a very quick onset, right? Historically, that would be true, but I think historically, it's because the United States, no matter what's happening, it's the fucking U.S. of A. It's always going to be there. So it would make sense that in any time of global uncertainty, what's going on in Europe, what's going on in Japan, I don't know what's going on anywhere, but I sure as fuck know that the U.S. is going to survive it, and I know the U.S. is going to be here tomorrow, so I'm parking my money in U.S. Treasury bonds because it's safe and fuck all the global volatility. But when the U.S. is the country that is inducing the volatility in a way that undermines the USD, undermines the U.S. economy, well, we have a fundamentally different situation where that prior analysis might no longer be valid, which should be accounted for here. I don't know if the Summers guy will bring this up. So
separately, what we do know, though, where the structural complexity of the market, and this is where, Larry, I agree with you, is acute and important to observe, is in the credit markets for private companies. And that is where you have to pay a lot of attention.
Okay, Larry, let me let you respond to Chamath's response to you. And then Ezra, I promise you're going to come in next. Larry, go ahead.
Chamath, as you well know, the vast majority of financial thinking emphasizes changes in the earnings prospects of companies associated with the strength of the economy as a major source of stock market fluctuations. And if you look at dividend strips, if you look at what's happening to analyst revisions, that's got a lot to do. Negative prospects for the economy has a lot to do with why the economy, why the stock market has turned downwards. The foreign exchange market's very big, and it's a big referendum on whether people have confidence in the United States. And somehow, tariffs, reduce imports, are supposed to reduce dollar selling and make the currency go up. And not only is the currency not going up, it's going down substantially. So we're seeing a pattern. Maybe it's all just due to one Japanese hedge fund, but maybe we're seeing a pattern that really looks pretty much like the Argentine pattern.
Ezra, you are hearing this debate. I think there's no debate that this was done in a very extreme fashion at a minimum. Do you wonder if this could have been done in a more gradual or thoughtful way? What's your take on the execution here by the administration of these tariffs and their response to the markets?
I can't say I wonder if it could have been done in a more gradual, thoughtful way. It could have.
Obviously.
I defer to Larry on the markets. I'm more of a connoisseur of arguments, and something I've been thinking about over the past very long 8 days is covering the 2024 election and covering Donald Trump's tariff promises. And it was a thing that liberals like me were doing.
Oh my God, please. Okay, first of all, I hate Ezra that he just brought up that he doesn't want to go into... No, I don't hate him for that, actually. I respect it. If he doesn't know anything about it, then just don't bring it up. That's totally fine, actually. I respect that. I hope he's about to bring up this weird game that conservatives get to play where they do this thing where they say, Trump's not going to do that, but if he does do it, it's a negotiating tactic. But if he does do it, but then he doesn't do it, then it was also, and then it's good for the, like, they live in all the worlds at the same time, right? Tariffs are good for the United States economy because it helps us foster domestic manufacturing. But if he gets rid of tariffs, it's good because he makes deals with other people, even though those deals with other people would then undermine our manufacturing. But then if he puts tariffs back on, then it's good because it helps our manufacturing, even though it undermines our deals with the other people. Like this, you can't do this. It's insane. It's insanity. Well, I hope he brings this up. Conservatives said that he wasn't going to do this, and he did do it, and then they defended it.
Where we do these shows and say, Donald Trump is promising a 10% to 20% global tariff, and then 65% tariff on China. And if he does that, it'll have this set of effects, higher prices, it'll create financial uncertainty, etc. And what I would be told, like the counter argument, was, oh, you libs. You always take him literally, and you should be taking him seriously. I had Ramaswamy on my show. He said, he's not going to do that. That's just a negotiating ploy. And this was the common line from Trump allies on Wall Street.
Yep.
And then I watched as he began doing not just that, but layering a series of them bilateral tariffs on top of that.
And then they defend it, and then they defend it, and then they defend it. Art of the deal, art of the deal, art of the deal.
the markets began freaking out. While they were freaking out, a bunch of his defenders said, no, actually, these tariffs, which we told you were never going to happen, are actually a great idea.
Yes!
We need to reset the entire global financial system, and you can't shift those tectonic plates without creating a few earthquakes.
But then when the tariffs go away, that was a good idea too. How could every idea be a good idea?
Then, the moment the tariffs paused, with a 90-day pause on the tariffs on top of the 10% and China tariff,
thank you.
Then I heard, nope, that pause is genius. How do you read the art of the deal?
Thank you.
What I observe from this is it usually when an idea is good, you don't need people jumping back and
forth to backwards rationalize it and then forward rationalize it and then say why it wasn't good. And then, yes.
Forth on it so often, going between these tariffs are a bad idea, but they're a smart negotiating ploy, to these tariffs plus are an actually great idea, and you should all calm down, as Trump said. You should all be cool. Back to no, these tariffs are a great idea. I think something I'd love to hear from David. It's very hard to break the pattern of being a podcast host. I would like to hear what the measure of success in 2 years is.
Oh, that's a good question. What is the measure of success? Because it seems like you guys, would it be successful, for instance? He should be more particular. What Ezra should ask is, would you consider it successful if the United States of America negotiated good or global trade deals with every single country such that we're still trading with them all? Or is it only successful if we are trade deficit neutral? Or is it only successful if we start manufacturing way more things in the United States? What is success to you? Because if success is only domestic manufacturing, then why are we negotiating trade deals at all? We shouldn't want to negotiate trade deals. We should just tariff them and make all our own shit, right? Because that's the goal with the tariffs, right? Is domestic manufacturing. Any trade deal you make is necessarily going to undercut your domestic manufacturers, unless you just want to be an export surplus country, which I don't know why the fuck the United States would want to do that. But
right, we can sit here and speculate about the effect of these, and I'm much more on Larry's side than what I'm hearing from Chamath and David. But what are your measures? What in 2 years, if manufacturing, employment or whatever is below?
Very good question. But we need to remember, these are the people doing the tariffs. We'd love to know what people in your... Was this a real thing? I saw this, but this must be like AI or some shit, right? This can't be a real thing. What is this? This video appears to be from Turning Point Actions, the People's Convention event. Really? This was from the inauguration ball? Was it? Thank God. For all of our cringe DEI shit and our non-binary women and all that bullshit, at least we didn't do this shit. At least we didn't go this far. Oh my God.
X, will you be unhappy if GDP is... What is a sort of objective yardstick where we could come back in 700 days and say, did this work out or was this a bad idea?
I would say probably the biggest thing would be whether the U.S. can reindustrialize to some extent so that we're not completely dependent for our supply chains on a potentially hostile adversary.
And what is the measure?
Like, what a non-answer.
For that, is it the quantity of manufacturing we're making?
And listen to Ezra. Even though he didn't want to go deep into whatever, he's asking more specific questions. Like, don't just say, we don't want to depend on other people, like at all, or like, what does that even fucking mean? But yes, ask specifically.
Supply chains on a potentially hostile adversary.
And what is the measure of that? Is it the quantity of manufacturing we're making? Is it the share of manufacturing?
I don't think it's a hard thing to understand.
Oh my God, that can't be the answer. If you don't even know what your goal is, then how can you be shaking up the world order? You don't even have a goal in mind at all. You can't even speak like you could say, for instance, well, maybe he's about to be fair, maybe he's about to. You can say like, well, it's really hard to measure that. I would say that a whatever percentage increase between this and that of manufacturing stuff domestically, a reduction of our global trade deficit, an onshoring of at least X, Y, and Z industries. Like these are kind of, you don't have to give like a hyper specific answer, but at least point in direction. But maybe he's about to, maybe he's about to, maybe he's about to.
That is it the quantity of manufacturing we're making? Is it the share of manufacturing?
I don't think it's a hard thing to understand. During COVID, we learned. Let me finish my point. I am saying it concisely. During COVID, we discovered that we were horribly dependent on a supply chain from China for some of our most essential products, for pharmaceuticals, for other medical gear that we needed during COVID.
Sure. So what would be
like? Let's assume that is the case, okay? Because everybody blows up this fucking mask bullshit, which I still don't believe in, okay? I think that was a political will problem, but I will believe that until the day that I die. Okay, I think that the mask thing had to do more with political will than just supply chains. Number one. Number two, if we're going to use COVID as an example of relying on other countries, COVID was an unbelievable success when it came to pharmaceuticals. Okay, there is in a historically short amount of time, there was a new vaccine that was manufactured and distributed worldwide in record time with an insane safety and effectiveness profile that was created in like 2 weeks because of the new technology that U.S. research and global research and U.S. capitalism and globalized capitalist cooperation like ended up creating. Like, we don't make that vaccine on our own. Probably not, right? Because I think a lot of the research for this and a lot of the final completion for this came from the BioNTech or whatever company that was a German pharmaceutical company. I don't know if we even have that vaccine after, we cut off trade from the rest of the world and do all of our own stuff. I don't know if that's the case. But these guys might not even think the COVID vaccine was real. So who the fuck even knows, I don't know.
If you were to put a metric on it.
Just as one example, but we've also learned that our entire supply chain for all sorts of industrial products now is dependent on China and other countries.
So let's be more precise. We have 4% unemployment.
Thank you. Wait, but this guy's a retard, right? David Sachs? But what's our unemployment is very low.
Low of our lifetimes. And do you think Americans want to?
I don't know anything about David Sachs other than I just see a bunch of bad stuff typed about him all the time. So I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy. Oh, wait, this guy's Sachs. I'm sorry. This guy's Sachs. This guy's Larry Summer. Who's this guy in the bottom left? Is he like a podcast host guy? I don't know what any of these people look like, okay?
So let's be more precise. We have 4% unemployment at the record low of our lifetimes.
True.
And do you think Americans want to
Co-host Jason,
work in these factories? And if so, which factories? Obviously pharmaceutical.
Thank you. Yes, true. What factory jobs do you think Americans are excited to be a part of? Please inform us.
That's a dependency. Obviously, building ships and weapons, that's a dependency. I think we can all agree on that. And that might be low hundreds of thousands of jobs. Do you believe we should be making Nike sneakers here? Do you believe we should be making jeans here again? What would be the objective measure of success? Like a certain number of jobs, certain number of factories, certain types of factories? Because the other piece that I don't understand, and maybe you can inform me here, Sachs,
help me,
is number one,
help me understand.
Who's going to do this work if we're going to be deporting millions of people? And we have
yes. True. Yes. True. We're deporting all these workers as well. True.
Lowest unemployment of our lifetimes, and we have automation coming to these factories, and Americans don't want to take these jobs historically. How is this all going to work? It seems a bit farcical to me that we're going to bring these things back.
I don't think the millions of Americans who lost their jobs in the heartland because we let China into the WTO, which is something that Larry, I think, supported and championed.
Oh, now we're going to go to a talking point? I'm sorry, are there millions and millions of Americans that are unemployed and they never found work again? Where are these people at? They're not in the U3. They don't show up in the U6. Where are these people at? Hello?
Americans who lost their jobs in the heartland because we let China into the WTO, which is something that Larry, I think, supported and championed.
We're talking about decades ago, though, right?
That's what started this whole
decades
thing.
Okay.
I don't think those millions of people want to lose their jobs. So
you're talking
So we're going to bring those people back. The people who are 70 years old, 75 are going to come back and work. The textile mills. My body yearns for the clothing manufacturing.
What are you talking about,
Respectfully, David.
You were Treasury Secretary when we walked China into the WTO, and you were just still defending it. I was just watching an interview. Hold on, Larry.
David,
Larry, you just did an interview with Neil Ferguson. Wait. Why am I the one who gets to talk for 2 seconds before I get interrupted?
Okay,
you guys get 5 to 10 minutes
finish your thoughts. Finish your thoughts for 3 minutes, and then
I get to speak for 2 seconds. Then you interrupt me. You speak for 5 or 10 minutes.
Go right ahead.
Larry, I just saw you do an interview with Neil Ferguson where he asked you, was it a good idea to bring China into the WTO? Was it a good idea to give them permanent normal trade relations status, basically MFN, which is something that Bill Clinton did in 2000, and I admit it was bipartisan. George W. Bush continued it. And you were defending this as a good idea for the country. What was the result of that over the past 25 years? Millions of industrial jobs were lost. They were exported to China. Millions of factories shut down. The United States has a diminished and hollowed out industrial base.
Hollowed out. Can we talk about the other side? Why does nobody ever list the positives? There were negative impacts from this in specified sectors, for sure. We should have done a better job dealing with that. That's true. But now you want to axe all global trade? Like, what? Like, imagine talking to some dude who's like 350 pounds and it's like, what are you doing, dog? Why are you so huge? And it's like, I just, I don't like to ever do anything with my body or my health or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I saw a picture of you 10 years ago and you were shredded. And like, I was like, yeah, but one day I was deadlifting and I tweaked my back a little bit and I hurt myself. It's like, okay, so what, you didn't like rehab or anything? It's like, no, since I injured myself once working out, I decided to abandon all of my dieting and exercising altogether and just become a huge fat slob because fuck it. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of weird. You couldn't have done something to like do like injury prevention or any other no, I dropped all of it. Oh, okay. Well, that seems a little short-sighted, but okay.
We certainly can't make the parts of the future, like drones or semiconductors. Jason, just to answer your question, yeah, obviously, some industries are more strategic than others. Do I personally care about sneakers or textiles? No, I personally don't. Do I care about semiconductors? Absolutely. Do I care about circuit boards? Do I care about drones? Do I care about robots? Do I care about EVs and cars. Absolutely.
Do you care about AI? Do you care about software? Do you care about any of the largest contributions that the United States has made to the world at all? No? That's cool. Okay. Based.
Okay.
Those industries, we are no longer in a position.
David?
We are no longer in a position as a country to make those products because we exported our entire supply chain and manufacturing base to China.
David,
so how is that a good idea, Larry?
Why did we do it? Can Larry, ask him why we did it. Ask him why he did it and ask him why we don't buy American now. And then ask what we got from it. Please, Larry, you're our guy, dude. You have to. Please, God.
David, I
Larry,
have
you
three
go,
questions
and
for
then
you.
Ezra, I'll go back to you and Jamal. Go
I
ahead,
have
Larry.
3 questions for you. 1, can you name a single trade barrier that was reduced by the United States associated with China accession? A single restriction that existed in the United States that had not been in place for 5 years before that we removed during China's WTO accession. Can you name one?
I don't think we should have done any of it, Larry. We reopened our markets to China.
The answer is no. And he's not going to have an answer for you, Larry. And I'm glad that you asked it. Ask him one more time so that the audience knows he doesn't know. Ask him.
What restriction?
Yes.
Your thesis is that we threw open the market and therefore we exposed ourselves to all of this China thing. And question I'm asking you is, can you name any restriction on Chinese exports to the United States that was in effect in 1999 and was removed by our WTO accession in 2000?
Nope.
Can you name any such restriction? Just name
Larry,
one.
This was a policy that built up over time and was basically made permanent. Hold on, it was made permanent when we walked China to the WTO.
Now we're just going to talk and yap and yap. He can't. He doesn't have any idea.
And gave them MFN status.
I'm sorry, David. I'll ask the question one more time.
Yeah. Oh, and he did it. I'm just going to ask the same question again. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
We had given them MFN status 15 years before. No one, they had MFN status. They had it for 15 years. There was not a single reduction in a barrier to Chinese trade. So the way in which you're describing it is just bears no resemblance to what it was.
Why was it necessary to bring him into the WTO? What was the point of bringing him into the WTO?
The point of bringing him into the WTO was to use the leverage that we had to win a whole variety of concessions that enabled us to
Larry, let's be
export
honest.
more to China.
This is an extraordinary
It's
rewriting of
called
history, Larry.
reciprocity.
This is an extraordinary
Let's
rewriting
go
of
on the history here. And go, let's move forward.
I want to
You're
respond to
denying
this.
history. You're
totally
denying
denying history. All right, listen.
This was a bad deal.
Hold on a second. Let's go back to this.
Just a minute. I just want to know the whole argument you are making is
bullshit.
about increased exports to the United States that had bad consequences. And so I'm just going to keep asking you, what barriers that previously existed?
Okay, I'll name them. I'll name them.
Go ahead, Jamal.
Number 1. Prior to the WTO, China imposed a bunch of export duties and tax.
Oh, he's reading. He Googled it. Oh, he's bailing this guy out so hard. He Googled and he's reading off his screen right now. Or he asked a fucking Grok AI or whatever.
I'll name them.
Go ahead, Jamal.
Number 1. Prior to the WTO, China imposed a bunch of export duties and taxes on a whole bunch of goods to control outflow. Okay, that prioritized domestic supply. As part of coming into the WTO, China said, hey, hold on, we'll limit these export duties to only a specific set of products. And then they capped those duties at agreed rates. Number 2, they eliminated export quotas. They historically had export quotas to manage the volume of goods. Under that WTO commitment, they agreed to phase out all those quantitative restrictions on exports, except were explicitly justified under WTO. Number 3, they removed the export licensing restrictions. Number 4, they ended state trading monopolies for exports. Number 5, they liberalized foreign trade rights. The point is, people thought
and it's a list thing too. The Grok or the AI always does this, right? Yeah.
that China was going to be a honeypot of economic activity. And it turned out to be a sucking sound, a grand sucking sound of opportunity where the globalist corporations saw a massive labor arbitrage. So it's fair to say.
The globalist corporations. Okay, so now corporations are evil? What do we... So if... Like, think about what you're saying. The globalist corporations. Okay, so in that case, stock market tanking and everything should be good, right? Because when we're talking about the stock market and stock, we're talking about corporations. So you do want to destroy the stock market. You do want to destroy American firms. You do want to reduce American firms' impact or footprint on the rest of the world. Like, just say that then. Own the argument at least.
To say that it was done with the best of intentions, but it was a bad deal. And they got one over on us.
I really want to say that rather than having 30 minutes of debate over something that happened in the 90s, I would like to go back to this question. I keep not hearing.
I will answer your question, Ezra, because that was a great question.
I would like to hear from David. But I'd love yours too.
I never got a chance to
I think there's a tendency to just begin talking in an anecdotal way.
This is not anecdotal. Okay,
look, we want to move forward.
Presidents announce these policies, and then there's never.
Give me what indices you are going to look for.
Yes.
If in 2 years it is under X, I can come back and we can have a conversation.
Here's some metrics.
Ezra, I'm so sorry.
Here's some metrics for you. Okay, let's go back to Bill Clinton's speech that was given at Johns Hopkins on March 9, 2000.
No, he was asking about David. Forward-looking metrics. What would you think would be successful 2 years from now? Not the history lesson.
Wait, hold on. We haven't finished the debate about China and PNTR. Okay.
But my question predated that debate.
Yeah, we're trying to
Listen, you're trying to change the subject. Let's just finish up on this topic.
No, we're trying to move forward. That's all.
We're trying to finish up on this topic. Okay.
Okay, we'll let you get the last word. Go ahead.
about this.
Okay, you can have last word.
So March 9, 2000, Bill Clinton announces PNTR at Johns Hopkins. It's a very famous speech.
Oh, my
Maybe you can
2000.
tell us about how it got written. Anyway.
And he said that, so in the year 2000, Bill Clinton and other Democrats said that we were going to do something about China, and we haven't even fucking done anything about fucking China.
Okay. I've never even seen this guy before, David Sachs, but I've heard him referenced a ton. And every time I read anything about him, he sounds like he's a fucking retard. And now I'm glad I can see in a live comment he is a fucking retard. But that's good. Is this another like crypto dipshit, or why did he even become popular or famous? David Sachs. What is he? Why is this guy at anything? He co-founded. He's a co-host of this podcast as well. Okay. Angel investments include Facebook, Uber, SpaceX, Palantir Technologies, and Airbnb. President Donald Trump named Sachs the White House AI and crypto czar for the incoming admin. Is that a thing right now? Is that still? Did that actually happen? What does that even mean? Do we have the crypto fund yet? I know he signed an EO for it, but okay.
Hey, Bill Clinton promises several things. He makes a number of arguments for PNTR. He does not think that this does nothing. Larry, your argument is that Bill Clinton didn't do anything. You're saying that somehow it happened under Reagan or something like that? That's not what Bill...
Do you think the stock market would have crashed so hard had people not continuously told everyone it would ruin America? Yes, of course. Yes, because these are bad things, and every person with a brain can see that they are bad things to destroy the United States' role in global trade.
Clinton was arguing. He said, number one, there'd be huge economic benefits for the U.S. He says, quote, by this agreement, we will increase exports of American products. He means to China. That will create American jobs. Okay, did that happen the way we intended? I don't think so. Number
really? No complementary positions opened up in the United States? Our labor force isn't more productive on average? We don't do end-stage manufacturing more or final stage assembly more of products and goods and services? We don't lead the world in things like software and technology? Software, things that like barely existed when Bill Clinton was even giving the speech? Really?
Is he believes that...
Have you looked at the data on export flows from the United States to China? It actually did happen at a quite substantial rate.
But with huge trade deficits for the United States.
So?
You're arguing that they did not act in a discriminatory way towards our products? This idea that Americans could just do business in China the way that they could do business here is ridiculous. Anyone who tried to do business over their nose, you have to create a JV, you have to get a local partner, give them 51%. It was extraordinarily difficult. We were discriminated against, Larry. It's ridiculous to try and claim that somehow this was an equal relationship, okay? And we imported far more from them than we ever exported to them. So Bill Clinton was wrong about that. Number two, he said that signing PNTR and bringing China to the WTO would promote democracy in China, that we would export one of democracy's most cherished values, economic freedom. Did that happen? I don't think so. He said this would strengthen global trade by ensuring...
Why are we even going over this Bill Clinton speech from 2000?
China adhere to international trade rules, reducing trade barriers, and resolving disputes through WTO. Did that happen? I don't think so. And then he said on national security, he said it would improve our national security to bring China to WTO and help make them rich. He said, quote, if we don't deal with China in this way, we'll increase the prospect that they will turn inward. That's not what happened. We helped make China rich. We've exported millions of jobs to them. They built up their economy and their supply chain to the point where now they are a global competitor to the United States. They're a peer competitor. We turned that baby dragon into a Drogon-sized monster that can now challenge us in Asia and across the world.
Gain at all from any of this?
Why in the world we have done that? Just for national security reasons. That was a very foolish thing to do.
Okay, so Larry, I guess I have to let you maybe self-grade. How did you guys do? Is there any regrets, as Sachs is pointing out there? Obviously, China has not magically become a democracy, but I guess you could argue they do have a middle class now. We haven't gone to war with them, so I guess you could argue that this has been good for relations. But to Sachs's point, they are incredibly powerful and they are our top adversary. How would you grade the history of this so we can move forward?
China was a surging, growing, reforming economy, growing at double-digit rates. That it was before there was any WTO agreement. The WTO agreement did not change a single rule that represented a U.S. restriction on imports from China. It did change a variety of rules, not as far as I would have liked, that let the United States export more to China and that protected United States intellectual property in China and that brought China more closely into the international system. You need a counterfactual for what would have happened if China had been excluded from the World Trade Organization. That counterfactual is not that they would not have sold goods to the United States. That principle had already been crossed 15 years before. Not a single restriction was reduced.
So,
but look,
anything you would have done differently?
I just don't get. I don't get the whole mindset here. I understand that we should have done more as a country for the Rust Belt and invested in it much more heavily.
Thank you. Yes.
If I was worried about dependence and strategic and all that, the last policy I would have wanted to abolish was the CHIPS Act. That's the largest, boldest thing the United States has ever done to avoid dependence in a national security area.
Great.
And
let me bring Chamath
the
in.
Trump administration has killed all of that.
Chamath, you heard Ezra's original question and the history here from Larry and David. Looking at, there's some industries that we need strategically, pharma, military, cars. These are fairly obvious. Rare earth minerals are obvious.
Rare earths.
But we also have the lowest unemployment of our lifetimes. And Americans probably don't want to work in factories en masse. What is your take on going forward, some metrics that this administration should, not Sachs is saying this, you're saying it. What would you measure this success as in terms of onshoring and reducing dependencies if, to Ezra's point, 2 years from now, we were to grade it? Give us some specifics here, Chama.
There is a major issue that the United States has that's much bigger than China, which can be framed in the lens of resiliency and the ability to fend for ourselves.
Oh my God.
There are supply chains.
And again, we're bouncing between all the arguments. And a lot of these arguments are good on their own. But when in conjunction, they are contradictory, and you have to resolve those dissonances. If you want to apply tariffs because you think it's important to protect some industry, and the protection of that industry is done for national security reasons and not economic reasons, then fine, do it and bite the bullet on the econ argument. This is going to hurt our economy in a way. It's going to cost more to buy this shit. But we think it's essential to manufacture it here, because in times of emergency, we don't know if we can rely on China to export us the things we need to create military products if we're going to war with somebody that's a friend with China. So we are going to spend more for it here because we think that's in the interest of our national security. But we're going to take the economic hit for it. But you can't try to live in all these worlds simultaneously. You can't say that, well, it's actually not bad for our economy and it's good for our military, everything else. And like, no, you can't have it all ways.
That have many single points of failure. And independent of whichever country that single point of failure exists, it could be an ally, or it could be a foe, or it could be a frenemy, that creates risk. And I think what we are learning, and David's right, it was really highlighted during COVID, we are not in a position to take care of what we need. So if I had to very precisely answer Ezra's question, I would say that we need to measure and protect 4 critical areas. Everything else, I think we can deal with. Some inefficient.
Like, this is fine, but you're not, nothing that you're talking about right now has anything to do with economics. These are national security reasons. All of these things that you're talking about are going to result in economic hits to the United States, which again is fine, but make that argument, honestly.
Some single points of failure. But the following 4 areas, Ezra, I would say are sacrosanct. Number 1 is all of the technology, both the chips as well as the enabling technology around artificial intelligence.
Travis Lamb, I only keep you in here because I need to have some opposition here, okay? But it's so hard because every MAGA person types the most retarded shit. Destiny, it seems as though it's only bad because of what it did to the stock market. Nobody's saying that. That's a straw man position. It's bad because the stock market is the first thing to notice it, but it's bad because it's going to hurt firms because it's going to make everything cost more. As those costs increase, it's going to mean that they're going to either have to fire people or raise costs on goods to people in the United States of America. If people spend more on those goods, they spend less on other goods. It leads to some firms having to lay people off because they can't afford to hire as many workers. It leads to people spending more on like basic goods and services, which is going to lead them to spending less on other things. And if we're domestically manufacturing it, those places are going to have less customers, so they're going to fire people. And then all of this is going to spiral in an even worse manner because as it's spiraling and the economy is contracting, the United States can't even issue debt to deal with the deficit in a way that we normally would to stimulate us out of any kind of economic recession, because now the United States is undermining its position in global trade as well, meaning that other people aren't going to be as keen to buy debt from us, or they might even start dumping debt from us like they're doing right now, because the United States isn't the bastion of free trade that it used to be, which means that if we issue debt to deal with our deficit, now we're also issuing that at higher interest rates. All of it is bad. So for you to say, like, people think you ought to be mad because of the stock market, that's bullshit. That's retarded. If you read the most retarded critique, then sure. What other option could the U.S. use to get countries to lower their taxes if that country refuses to negotiate? Nobody has refused to negotiate. You're asking about dealing with a hypothetical problem that hasn't existed yet. If you want to renegotiate something, then go and talk to them and start doing trade deals. Welcome to big boy politics. You don't just get to take a sledgehammer and destroy fucking everything because people aren't even acquiescing to demands that you haven't even made. Trump didn't even make any demands of any other countries yet. Like, okay.
It must be a robust, largely American supply chain. It must. You cannot have single points of failure outside the United States, because what you see is even in allied countries, their posture towards things like free speech and other things can ebb and flow. Their posture on trade, their posture on defense. Okay, so that's number 1 can change.
Chips. Got it.
Number 2 is energy. We have a critical deficit of electrons in America. We do not have the capability we need to make the energy we need quickly in many ways. We have supply chain issues on nat gas. We have critical supply chains that can be shut off by China around photovoltaics. So whether you believe in coal, whether you believe in nat gas, whether you believe in clean energy, we are in a very
fragile place. We got to shore that up. Okay, I think we're in agreement. Keep going.
Number 3 there are critical material inputs that drive the material science of the future. Rare earths are an example. Going back to chips, things like gallium, things like phosphorus even. So we have a critical minerals and rare earths and material science input problem. And then the 4th, Ezra, are pharma APIs, so that when American citizens get sick, we have the ability to not just make it, but also design it and manufacture it. Because some of these APIs, the active principal ingredients for many of the drugs, require very convoluted and complicated processes, cold chains, and the like. And again, we depend on folks whose view of the United States can change in real time. So if I had to say to you, Ezra, what I would expect is if the United States government, whoever was in charge, would put those 4 things on a board, then detail out all of the key inputs, measure how much we can make ourselves versus import, and then basically try to level that playing field, we would be in a very good place.
A couple things, because I think I probably agree with all of that, and what it sounds like is an excellent argument
for ours. I don't know what he's going to say, but like multilateral trade agreements or something here. But this is not what the Trump admin is doing, right? If those are your concerns, then fine. But the Trump admin is not taking a step anywhere near any of those goals.
We would be in a very good place.
A couple things, because I
then
think
why
I
didn't they lower them when Trump mentioned tariffs in the first place? The tariffs that Trump says exist don't exist. Those aren't real. The tariffs that were on the board aren't real. You know this. Okay, I'm good.
Playing field,
Sorry.
we detail out all of the key inputs, measure how much we can make ourselves versus import, and then basically try to level that playing field, we would be in a very good place.
A couple things, because I think I probably agree with all of that, and what it sounds like is an excellent argument for Joe Biden's policies, which were functionally, maybe not the pharmacide.
Was the subsidization of important key industries for national defense that are important to the United States so that we can foster those things here. Yes.
It's literally that. Let's pull out semiconductors and the semiconductor supply chain. Let's pull out energy. Let's pull out a couple of things like that. You know, what was it? A high fence around a small garden is what Jake Sullivan called it. Let's particularly try to restrict the supply chain export of AI critical materials to China. They had a whole set of policies about this.
Yep.
Now, the Trump administration, the thing we are in theory here discussing is an extraordinarily broad-based set of policies. It is tariffs on not just China, it's on Brazil. It's not just on critical industries like Chamath is talking about, but it's on, mangoes and avocados and, lumber from Canada and basically everything else. I guess there's an argument I could sort of extract out of this that the Biden administration believed in what they call friendshoring, which is that you want to create an integrated supply chain of allied countries that we can work with and that we can rely on. And the Trump administration, I think, believes something, depending on who's talking, more like that the entire supply chain needs to be onshored to America specifically. But one of the problems, and the reason I keep trying to push people to be very clear about their arguments and very clear about their metrics,
they're all contradictory.
Is that I feel like there's this king's cup of what we're trying to achieve here, where one day it's that we're trying to achieve the reindustrialization of the American heartland, and the next we're trying to replace the income tax with tariff income, and then the next we're just using it as all-purpose surplus leverage against any country that does
like why are we bragging about how much money we're making on tariffs when the goal is to not have to get, ideally Donald Trump's goal is to never be paid a tariff ever, because we're not importing things anywhere. We're just making it here. So your tariff income will disappear, no? Like
anything we don't like. And the next day we're, using it for an entirely third purpose. And maybe we're just going to use it to isolate China, but to bring in our friends. But none of these, you can't do all of these things at once. And it needs to be very stable if you're going to get companies to do these long-term CapEx investment decisions that take decades to play out. Nobody I know in the markets.
The fact is,
CEOs,
you guys didn't want to change anything. You guys didn't
oh
want to
my God, this guy is actually fucking retarded. Holy shit.
I wasn't in the Biden administration, number one.
Like, hello, what do you mean they didn't do anything about anything? He literally just mentioned the CHIPS Act. Was the CHIPS Act a bad idea? Was that not taking steps in that direction? He literally named multiple things that Biden had done in his administration to try to move in this direction. But okay,
Ezra and Larry as a team.
I would love to change.
I just want to make sure.
I would love to change all kinds of things.
You mean the Democrats didn't want to change anything?
Of course.
Let's see if we
Larry won't even admit that PNTR did anything.
Can we not keep doing PNTR for a minute?
Let's look forward, not backwards.
Look at the CHIPS Act. Look at the IRA Act.
Yes.
They did the exact things we're talking about.
Larry, go ahead.
Let's see if we can find a little bit of agreement.
Please.
Here.
Don't.
I agree with Chamath's agenda. I may not agree in every detail, but I broadly agree with Chamath's agenda. And I'll go a little further than that, Ezra. I think Joe Biden's attachment to energy security was kind of selective and heavily oriented to green technologies, not others. I thought canceling the Keystone Pipeline was a clear mistake. I thought
I'd have to look into the Keystone Pipeline stuff more, but my understanding is that project has been dead for a while because of a combination of protests, because of a combination of stupid environmental, I shouldn't say stupid environmental, I don't know if the environmental regulations were out, but that Keystone Pipeline has just been kind of dead for a while, before even Biden came to office. I would have to look into it more though. But
stopping a variety of things involving liquid natural gas were a clear mistake. So I think the Biden administration's approach to regulation that empowered every NGO with respect to stopping transmission lines, with respect to constructing power plants because of the importance of Democratic constituencies was a mistake. So I think energy security is a central objective of policy, and that there's a lot of room to move beyond what the Biden administration did. I actually believe that very strongly and agree with Chamath and David. What I don't understand is CHIPS, absolutely right. The CHIPS Act was all about making there be an American semiconductor industry with production in the United States as a central priority. The Trump administration has declared war on that. Rare earths, you want to have a strategic petroleum reserve for any rare earth. You want to do more mining in the areas that Chamath says we should in the United States or in friendly countries. I am all for that. Here's what I cannot understand, Chamath. I don't see how your resilience agenda drives anywhere near Liberation Day and the emphasis on tariffs. It drives towards a set of specific industrial policies, perhaps including tariffs in some particular product areas. But steel from Canada, anything from Lesotho, any natural resource product across the board tariffs on everything. I think you are absolutely right about resilience and that traditional conventional economics has given it too little thought and that COVID pointed that up as a central issue. What I can't understand is why Donald Trump's echoing of Lee Iacocca from the 80s about tariffs is responsive to any of that.
Deals, but this is the point I'm trying to draw around Biden. I'm not saying I agree with every way the Biden administration defined its objectives. I just read an entire book about the failures of democratic policymaking in this specific era. What I am saying is the Biden administration's view of trade was that there are targeted industries we should be putting a lot of both domestic policy and international policy into play in order to protect and reshore or friendshore. And the Trump administration's view is that you have a generalized problem running all across the world that requires highly general policies. That then when I ask people to defend it, they sort of move to this targeted argument. Donald Trump's view, I feel like we end up making something that is not that complicated into something much more complex than it is. Since the 80s, Larry's point about Lee Iacocca.
Everyone's been screwing us. He's saying everybody's been screwing us over, everybody's taking advantage of us, and we're finally going to get back at him. That's been Donald Trump's view.
To hold the view that any time the U.S. is operating at a trade deficit with someone else,
we're getting fucked
that
over.
is evidence we are being ripped off. And that is how you get at least the initial set of tariffs here that work off of bilateral trade deficits and try to correct every single one with every single country, be it Lesotho or a collection of islands inhabited by penguins. I think it's really important to be connected to the policy that was actually announced and not sort of projecting all of our own onto it.
Yes, because everybody does this. Donald Trump is an empty vessel that you can protect. You can project anything you want onto what he's doing or why he's doing. Any motivation, you can do whatever you want. It's bullshit.
Yes, Larry's right that you could have a different set of critical industries than Biden did. The Biden team was very focused on clean energy over other kinds of energy. I also did not agree with the liquid gas pause. I thought there was some, and we did not do nearly enough on things like permitting reform, right? There's a lot you could have done that they didn't do. But if what you have in your head is a targeted idea of reshoring specific industries or nearshoring or friendshoring or whatever, which is kind of what I'm hearing from a number of people on this call, then it seems like you would want targeted policies. And what we have is not targeted policies. It's broad-based policies, a 90-day pause on larger broad-based policies, and a huge trade war with China.
I would like to hear a defense from somebody.
I'll give it to you.
Ezra and I agree. Specific policies. I'd like somebody to explain to me why it's a remotely sensible theory to say that the United States is being exploited by any country where the overall pattern of trade is such that we are running a trade deficit. And maybe in the process, you could explain to me why my grocery store is exploiting me. Because
Basic econ questions. Here we go. Thank you. Yes. Can we do some high school economics? Hell the fuck yes. Please, basic questions.
Running a massive trade deficit with that.
Okay, trade deficit. Chamath or Saxon wants to take it.
I can start, then maybe Saxon. So let me actually start by giving some credit to where Biden did do a few things, right? Just in the spirit of finding some common ground. Inside the IRA, I think that there were two things, and I've said this pretty repeatedly, but I just want to put it on the record again. The ITC credits and the ITC transfer markets for those credits, the tax equity markets, are critical industries in America to support private investment in all kinds of very complicated markets, energy markets being the most important. And what the Biden administration did, to their credit, was remove the uncertainty because those things had to be renewed over and over again. And they gave us a very long window where we could underwrite investments. To your point, Ezra, that was smart. But it's important to also remember that in order to get Biden's budget done, what they did was they had Manchin roll over on permitting reform. And Ezra, you know this probably better than all of us. When you look inside of the CHIPS Act, as smart as that initial policy was, if you ask, why has nothing actually happened? Why have no fabs actually been built other than grandiose statements? The answer is that, which you speak to in your book. It's just this complete malaise and inability to actually get these things permitted and turned on, even when it's right. So I just want to acknowledge that that's there. So Larry, very, very importantly to your question, the thing that we have to acknowledge is that in certain countries, what you have is a very blurry line between private and public industry. And they have this very tight coupling. And again, I hate to go back to China, but it is the best example of this, where what do they have?
I wish that and this is what's so frustrating to me. So if you want to have criticisms of how the CHIPS Act turned out or whatever, these are fine statements. Everything he's making right now is a fine statement. But it's such a nuanced view of trade now. But then when Donald Trump is being spoken about, well, here's why global tariffs on everything will fix everything. Like, where is this level of nuance when we're talking about what Donald Trump is currently doing? Why is this absent?
One other country, just for the sake of it.
We can use Korea, we can use Japan, we can use Germany, okay? There are instances where the government balance sheets support private industry. They can support them in three different ways. Number one is tax credits that they can use, the subsidies that they can use to build the things that they need. Number two is how then they can support that in the active selling and engagement in public spot markets to shape the demand curve of the things that are made. And then number three is the taxation on the back end, the terms of repayment and the capital cycle. Those are things that in the United States, we overwhelmingly turn the responsibility over to the private markets to do. We are the cleanest, the purest form of capitalism in that sense. But many other countries are shades of this. And again, let's not talk about China, which is so Larry, hold on a second. So Larry, so what you have is, how do you defend dumping? How do you defend that? How do you defend spot market manipulation that drives American companies out of business? how do you fight that? And I think...
Do you fight it with global tariffs?
If President Trump had announced a big...
And this is always the answer. Please, I hope this goes one level deeper. Because Larry's just going to say, if President Trump had announced a targeted tariff plan or a targeted plan to force these countries to bend in these particular ways, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But he didn't do that.
Broadening of anti-dumping law to confront a variety of instances of what the administration, after careful economic analysis, saw as inappropriate subsidy. I might or might not have thought that they were doing that in the right way.
Sure.
But we wouldn't be having this argument.
Yes! True! That's not what he's doing, though. Everything you just said, that's great. How the fuck do tariffs on Canada or the EU help us with that, right? Please go one level deeper on this. Please make them answer this. Chamath is going to pass it over to Sachs, and Sachs is going to fucking yap on some retarded shit next. Please.
The front pages would not be about tariff policy day after day, and the stock market would not be down by $5 trillion. The central thing we are discussing is not whether there are sensible modifications to trade policy to respond to bad practices in other countries or to promote resilience. Those are technical debates that, frankly, aren't that interesting to a large number of people. The question is whether declaring that we need a whole new era of U.S. economic policy around universal tariffs against everything is a rational step forward, or using bilateral trade surpluses as a judge.
Now we're talking about the Monte Carlo simulation of how to achieve the outcome. And what I am saying is, there is, just as much as you and I want to guess, the fundamental and honest answer is none of us know. The people in the White House, what they know, they will share a little bit at a time. Because the reality is, what you want...
Are you fucking serious? We're going to go with the Trump traitors in the White House, the traitors, not traitors, that these guys are like magical econ wizards, that they have access to some super secret piece of information that just none of us are privy to, that none of us could possibly fathom. They're working on a level that's just unfathomable compared to our puny human minds, really?
...wanted was a white paper. Or if what you wanted was paint by numbers, I think back to David's point, all that would do is just take any leverage that they had and give people the opportunity to shape their response. And I think in traditional...
But that's what we want. We want people to shape their response, don't we? If we're saying that these are the horrible fucking things that we want other countries not to do, and that's why we're going to tariff them, okay, well then, if they know what they shouldn't be doing, don't we want them to shape their responses around that? Isn't that good?
No game theory. And again, in traditional game theory, I think the right thing to do is when you're playing poker, you play street by street. What's the flop? Make a set of actions. What's the turn? Make a set of actions. What's the river? Make a set of actions. And I think if you're going to play to win, this is what they should do. Keep their cards very, very close to the vest. Realize that you can't necessarily...
What was that poker analogy? You play street by street? What does that even fucking mean? Wait, what? The turn and the river are considered two streets, right? The next street is the turn of the river, but you don't play street by... I mean, you make bets street by street, but you're incorporating all the information and you're thinking to the river and the showdown for the entirety of a hand of poker. I don't know what the fuck that analogy was, but okay.
Surgically go and attack the lithium market first, then the rare earth market second, because it all goes back to the same balance sheet. It's the same actor over and over.
I think there's a useful analogy to draw here. I think a lot about an article Mark Danner wrote in the New York Review of Books many years ago about the Iraq War. And it's an article that has stuck in my mind forever, because what he says about it is that one of the difficulties of the politics of the Iraq War is there was no one war. There was everybody's private war that they were projecting on to the Bush administration. You have the liberal humanitarian vision of why we were going to war and what that war would look like. You had a realist vision for it. You had a vision that was more about weapons of mass destruction and keeping the homeland safe from terrorism. You had people believe there was an Iraq-Al-Qaeda connection. There were really dozens of these, which is how you got as broad a coalition behind as bad a policy as that together. Because everybody said, you know, they're being a little bit vague about what's really going on here and why we're really doing this. But I bet you, if you go into their heart of hearts, what they want is the thing I want, even though the policy doesn't quite match what policy you would get from starting from my premises. And that's really what I hear here. I hear it on this show, but I hear it in general in the discussion around this, that there are a lot of different objectives being projected onto Donald Trump and his trade war. The objectives do not fit the policies we're seeing. The objectives are not stably articulated by Donald Trump or the people around him, nor is any specific objective being articulated in a stable way without contradicting objectives also being articulated at the same time. And look, maybe in the end, and this is why I want to push you all on metrics, you get something you like out of this. But you're giving away a lot of clarity just on the trust that what is happening is people are keeping a good hand of cards with a good strategy of poker hidden from you. As opposed to what's happening is what we seem to be seeing in public, which is Donald Trump is a chaotic and erratic person. They are making policy in a chaotic and erratic way. That policy is having chaotic and erratic consequences, and then they are operating and moving on the fly in chaotic and erratic fashion.
Sachs, you heard Ezra say that he feels this administration is being a bit chaotic in the approach here. What's the counter to that? You heard Chamath say, hey, this is a really thoughtful. They're holding their cards close to the chest. Maybe you could clarify what your position is. Is this too chaotic, or is this crazy?
What I'm
like
hearing is a bunch of process objections to Trump's policy, and I'm hearing a bunch of nitpicking. What about Lesotho or whatever? Okay, look, this is a very unrealistic view of politics. When we've had a bipartisan consensus.
This guy's retarded, dude. This David Sachs who said this guy's just a fucking retard. That's all he is. He's just a dipshit.
In Washington for decades, that unfettered free trade is a good thing, no matter how big our trade deficits got, no matter how rich and powerful China got, no matter how unfair the trade practices got, no matter how many millions of our jobs and factories got exported overseas. This has been the bipartisan consensus in Washington. And Larry, you're right that it started before the Clinton administration, and the George W. Bush administration definitely accelerated it. But there has absolutely been a bipartisan consensus in Washington that this sort of unfettered free trade policy was good for the country. Now, how do you change that? Now, look, you can nitpick this, and you can make all the process objections you want, but Donald Trump has changed the conversation.
I just
Ezra, let me finish.
You keep saying I've offered a process objection, but I'm objecting to the absence of clear goals.
Ezra, you were pointing to Donald Trump's views when he was a public figure in the 1980s and 1990s on trade as somehow he was wrong. He was not wrong. He was one of the few people and the few public figures in America who was right about this. I think most people today would say he was right about this, that throwing open our markets to these foreign products without thinking about the consequences was a mistake.
You guys have me completely confused. Really, you do.
No, I'm confused about the incoherence of your position. Larry,
David,
you still believe that the Clinton administration, let's call it a bipartisan consensus of that era, was correct, while at the same time you're arguing that PNTR didn't do anything.
I think it is really telling that you are so much more loath to defend what we are seeing than to attack what has been. If you want to, it's fine. Like, I guess you could have, it would be interesting to have you and Larry go, if you'd be interested to have you and Larry go 12 rounds on the Clinton era. But, you know, when I say to you, listen, there's not a stable set of objectives that fit the policy here.
Can I answer
you say that's a process objection?
I just would like somebody to
defend the thing they keep actually doing.
I would like somebody to explain to me here. I understood Chamath. Chamath, resilient.
Also, process objection. When people say stuff like that in policy debate, that's the same type of fallacy of when I'm arguing with people and they're like, I don't want to get in the weeds. That's like a shortcut for I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And I just kind of want to talk in these very broad conceptual terms because that's kind of like more fun and cool. But I don't actually have any fucking clue like what's going on here. Process is paramount. You don't have actual things without process. A really good example of that we've seen recently in the United States has to do with the deportation of people without due process. Without due process, you have no other rights. Okay, your rights exist on paper; they don't mean anything without due process. If you deprive people of processes or ways to enact things, like a process is a way to get to your end point. You can't just say, "Oh, you can't have a process issue." Well, one, Ezra wasn't just complaining about process issues; he was complaining about the actual policy aims and goals that seem to be different from the Trump admin or change every day. But two, the process is important.
Central 4 sectors. Are we more resilient in the 4 sectors? What's the answer 2 years from now? I got that. I agree. All that. I cannot make any linkage between a 10% across the board tariff, a tariff on steel, a tariff on automobiles, and much of what the rest of the president says, and your very valid objectives. I hear David give this free trade has destroyed America and we're going to undo that. And eviscerated the heartland, all this stuff. And I just want to understand how we'll know whether we have fixed it.
Okay, look, well, I can answer this too.
Go ahead, David.
All right, look, Larry and Ezra, welcome to a political coalition. Different people have different objectives, just like different people had different objectives for the policy that we had in place 25 years ago. Okay, there are some people who think that we should have an across-the-board 10% tariff to raise revenue because the country needs revenue, and that would be a better way to raise revenue than to, say, have income taxes or capital gains taxes. Stan Druckenmiller, who's not a fan of tariffs, nonetheless said that he would support a 10% tariff, no more than 10, but up to 10, as a way to raise revenue. Okay, that's his point of view. There are other people, and I would say I'm more someone who thinks about the geopolitical consequence of this, who think it was a huge mistake to throw open our markets to Chinese products, basically feeding their economy to the point where they could become a pure competitor of the United States and threaten the U.S. world order. There's different people with different objectives.
One more time, because you are just not speaking truth.
I want
to know one restriction that the United States had on Chinese products.
He's never going to answer
that was changed in the year 2000. You said 7 times, throw open our market to Chinese products. I want to know one example in which the United States opened its market in 1999 or 2000.
The point of PNTR. Well, can
you name one product where restrictions were reduced?
Okay, David, name it.
Listen, you're mischaracterizing what PNTR did. We can play this like a grok game if you want. People can go ahead and grok this question, and they'll get this answer. Look, the answer is that before PNTR, China was granted MFN on a year-by-year basis by Congress.
This AI shit, I mean, it's not new with AI. I guess it's anything. I don't even know what the analogy would be. Like using Dreamweaver to pretend that you're like a web designer, like you can do real, like it's just what did I see yesterday? Do you remember Billy Crystal, the guy who apparently faked his YouTube or his, I don't know, some gaming speedrun things, and he He sued the one dude who, Karl Jobst. And Karl lost because it wasn't about the faking of the records. It was about him blaming the dude for some guy committing suicide and lying about shit there. Where did he say? Hold on. Wait, fuck. I just saw this thread today. No. Oh, was it Billy Mitchell? Not Crystal? Whatever the fuck his name was. Billy Crystal's the guy on the bulwark. You mean Billy Mitchell? My bad. I saw a screenshot from Karl Jobst in his Discord, and he was saying, we fed all the information into like Grok or ChatGPT or some shit, and they said that there's no possible way we should have ever lost that court case. Like, bro, kill me. Are you fucking serious? Oh, this? Okay, so here is what is interesting. We fed all the court transcripts into AI. It said there is no scenario where I lose, LOL. It said even if Billy wins, the damages will be nominal, and he will have to pay my costs.
Correct? PNTR made it permanent. What does that do? It created a permanent new framework for trade relations between the United States and China. So it created permanence and it created a certain expectation. What did that enable? Massive investment by US companies in China. So all the bean counters from McKinsey started talking about outsourcing and just-in-time manufacturing. They started moving the factories over there in a much greater way. You know, the Mitt Romneys and private equity. Hold on a second, let me finish. The Mitt Romneys and private equity said, this is a great idea. Let's move all of our manufacturing.
Could we agree that whether or not it was the WTO?
Hold on, the bankers on Wall Street got to financialize and securitize all sorts of new products. Okay.
Oh God.
That was the result of PNTR.
The thing we have to decide really right now as a country is if the thing that you all are trying to replace us with is better, right? If it will work. And so I want to go back to what you said a minute ago, David, when you're like, welcome to political coalitions. Larry has been in politics a long time. He was Treasury Secretary. I've covered politics for a long time. I'm familiar with political coalitions. In fact, a lot of my book is currently about the problems in the way the Democratic coalition, with too many objectives all at once, can end up destroying the ability of the policy to actually achieve a clear goal. So this is precisely the non-procedural objection I am bringing here. This is why I think it is dangerous to be treating an upheaval of the entire global financial system without a clearly defined objective that is connected to a policy. And so the question is, if the idea is that there are all these different players here who have all these different policy objectives that would connect to all these different policies and everybody's getting a little bit of them and Trump is kind of flipping back and forth through different versions of them, you could end up, despite, yes, whatever mistakes were made in the free trade consensus, which I do agree that we had, you could end up with a bad and next, not even consensus, just a bad next policy. An unclear coalition that is fighting with itself and is making policy without a strong process can create not like nitpicky procedural problems, but actual damage and disasters.
Chamath, let's try to look forward here. This obviously has been a cataclysmic, chaotic, intense, whatever descriptor you want to use of the past week.
Productive.
Okay, sure.
Good one.
And it certainly created massive swings in the market. Is this all going to cause a recession? Is this too violent of an approach to markets? That is, I think, a valid criticism that people have, including, the majority of business leaders are saying, hey, I think I have to start layoffs. You had United Airlines say, we're not going to give any guidance. This feels to business leaders, Republican business leaders primarily, and market participants as just far too chaotic, and they can't plan. And if they can't plan, then they stop planning, which then is going to cause layoffs. It's going to cause bankruptcies. And who knows what the second and third order consequences are going to be. So what's going to happen here over the next couple of weeks and months?
So just on the recession question, and I'd like to give an answer to Ezra and Larry. I think that, and I've said this for about a year, it was clear to me that we were sneakily in a recession before. And the reason was the vast amounts of money and deficits that were being pumped into government services that perverted the actual GDP picture.
Oh, in this one.
So as Doge sort of slows down that money flow, and as...
You lying fuck. Did this podcast, was it recorded by the time Elon mentioned $150 billion in savings? And then that other, was it a cabinet guy that came out and said maybe it's $50 billion in savings? Please, God, I hope that announcement was before here.
As the consensus in Congress gets to a better budget, I think that you're going to see that the government was probably responsible for 100 to 150 basis points of just waste. And if you take that out, you will technically be in a recession. That was independent of these tariffs. And I think that that's where the true economy, Jason, was. And I think that we're going to just find that out. So that's that. On where we go from here, I can give you an anecdote and I'll give you a projection. The anecdote is this weekend. My wife and I were in bed and a person called me, very successful businessman who was representing the president of a country, saying, hey, Chamath, I need some advice. What do we do here? And we walked through the three things that he and his government, that their government, were trying to figure out because they wanted an off-ramp. They were like, I'm ready to cry uncle. We're ready to tap out. And again, he was calling me as a private citizen, but I think this conversation was very instructive. Number one, he's like, look, we have these really high tariffs on inbound American products. We're happy to cut these things to zero. And I said, well, you should do that. Second, while we were exploring, he's like, yeah, we have an enormous capital purchase with Airbus. I said, cancel it. Swap it to Boeing. He's like, done. And then the third, which was interesting, is he's like, we need to import an enormous amount of energy. And I said, well, who do you give that concession to right now? And it was a non-American company. And I said, well, why wouldn't you just RFP that to an American business and let them compete? And he's like, we'd be open to that as well. So he said, we're getting prepared. We want to find a way to talk to the Trump administration. And I'm like, great, however I can be helpful, I'll be helpful to you. I got off the phone, I looked at my wife and I said, if even 30 of these 75 countries do a deal anywhere remotely close to this, this was an enormous win. So let me give you my projection, Jason, of what the art of the deal could be here. What you do is you can rewrite Bretton Woods 2.0. What was Bretton Woods 1.0? It was fixing exchange rates. It was setting up the IMF. It was setting up the World Bank. Those were the conditions on the ground post-World War II. It made a lot of sense. What would we do if we had to write the Mar-a-Lago Accords right now? I think what we would do is work backwards from the question that Ezra asked and the answer that I gave. How do we create resiliency in these critical markets? Number one, a framework for that. Number two is how do we create limits for government-sponsored intervention against capital for-profit companies, many of whom are American, so that we can actually compete on a level playing field. And then number three, very simply, if you can do business in my country, why can I not do business in yours? And I'll just give you that story for 1 second. I was responsible. I was the head of every single entity of Facebook outside of the United States. I opened every market. My team and I created a framework for dominating. We figured out how to crack Brazil, India, Russia. The one market that we never could ever make a single iota of progress?
China.
Say it, Jason, with me.
Well, China, Russia.
No,
Iran.
wrong. We won in Russia. So my point is, in every single market except one, is it that we were just lucky in 174 markets and one we were stupid? No. So I think that the Mar-a-Lago Accords, this sort of Bretton Woods 2.0, is the outcome, Ezra. It will basically use tariffs as a way to get these governments to a table and allow us to negotiate a much fairer economic quid pro quo.
Here's my concern with this theory. I want to leave out, I'll leave the sort of question of what the real economy looked like to Larry. This world, in which what is happening is a business leader who represents the country is calling you and saying, okay, what do we need to do to deal? Right? They're coming to Donald Trump, and they are going to come to Donald Trump. As Larry said earlier, there's no doubt that the U.S. economic leverage is enormous. And virtually every country faced with our might is going to try to cut a deal with us. But then there's a call they're not making to you, that they're making to someone else, which is we have allowed, or we have approached the U.S. as a functionally benign partner for a very long time. And now they're becoming a dangerous partner. They are very, very strong, and they will use that strength to crush countries smaller than them when it suits the whims of a personalist regime run by a person who...
MAGA has all things at once. They can do no wrong. It's always someone else's fault. Are we on the brink of a recession? Guess what? We were already in a recession. Checkmate. Yeah, but they'd never say that for like 2022 to 2023 when the world economy was slumping after the war in Ukraine started and everything, right? That wasn't like the market's correcting, or that wasn't like a hidden recession just coming out to be like, it's all bullshit.
His feelings even about people that the U.S. or countries the U.S. traditionally considered allies like Canada or much of Europe change. And so, yes, on the one hand, for the next year or two, we want to avoid getting a big tariff slapped on us. And so we got to figure out what is it that if we offer it to Donald Trump, he will say to himself, that was enough of a give that, I can move on to someone else. I can make them the focus of my ire. And on the other hand, they're going to begin to build fortresses and deals and partnerships and approaches that make sure they're less exposed to our ability to wield this power against them in the future.
Yep.
But before I came on the show, I had gone on X and I saw
whatever.
a clip of you going around where you're saying that one of the problems with the Biden administration was that you couldn't get anybody on the phone. And the Trump administration, you make the call, the deputy chief of staff picks up, you say, hey, I need you to talk to this company. I work with them. They're freaking out about the tariffs. The deputy chief of staff tells the company, they work something out.
No, not that they work something out. They listen.
They listen. This world in which we are doing the deal making by individual relationships, by who can get their calls answered, not by rules that feel clear and stable.
That's how the Biden administration works, Ezra.
That's not what Chamath said.
And that's not what I said.
Well, Chamath,
no, Ezra, you're trying to make it sound like corruption.
Hold on.
Ezra, I was George Clooney that was making the call. Who cares what George Clooney thinks?
Didn't you just say on... well, I was very, very critical of Biden.
I saw that clip, Ezra, and what Chamath said, what Chamath said is simply that the White House listens when he calls, whereas he can get his calls returned by the Obama administration.
Great. I think we're actually not saying something all that different here.
You made it sound like corruption.
He's so mad. This is the call they're referring to, by the way.
This is one thing I'll tell you about the Trump administration, which is totally different. Okay, I was a lifelong Democrat. Okay, I was a mega donor to the Democrats. Like dinner with Obama level donor. Okay, I couldn't get a fucking phone call returned from the White House to save my life. The only thing that happened to me was I made an off-color comment about like something in China, and I had the Biden administration like basically say something, like essentially put out a press release basically saying I was like, mean. That's all I got for millions of dollars. That, you know what I mean? Like,
for being honest.
I mean, I was like, hey man, there's like a lot of problems in America. Like, talk to me about the fentanyl crisis before we talk about everything else. Anyways, the Trump administration is totally different. There's not a single person there you can't get on the phone and talk to. I'll give you an example of this. A friend of mine's company was really impacted with these tariffs in a bad way, okay? This is like a really amazing, legitimate American business, 150-year-old business, family-owned, all this stuff. And I was able to call the deputy chief of staff and I said, hey, can you talk to the CEO? And just so he...
Just, by the way, what he's describing right now is just open, wanton corruption. That's what that is, right? I had a business. It was going to be negatively impacted, but I was able to make a phone call. And because I'm a mega multi-million-dollar donor or whatever, they were able to fix my friend's business up real nice for me. Right? This is like a racket.
You're on the ground. He's like instantly putting me on the phone. You know, my wife runs a pharmaceutical business. And, you know, we wanted to make sure that the administration understood like all the implications for rare diseases and orphan drugs. What happens if these tariffs like cripple the R&D budgets? Because there's 30 million Americans with rare diseases. Rare diseases means it's not like diabetes or cancer. Yeah. It's like 200,000 people or less. But there's 30 million of these Americans. 2/3 are kids. And the only companies that work on such small markets are these small biotech companies. And the tariffs create a lot of uncertainty. We were able to talk to all of them. They were like, explain the issue. I want to understand it. So this is what's also totally different, which I really give them a lot of respect. They are willing to debate it with you. You can pick up the phone and talk to these people. I've never had that experience, guys. I mean, look, I was like a senior person at Facebook, could never get a meeting. I only met Obama once when he came to the thing. Then when I was running an investment fund, successful, I had dinner with Obama, but it was, you know, under the purposes of should I donate to the foundation? You know, I've donated millions of dollars to Democrats. I've never been to the Oval. Okay? But the minute it's like here, it's like, hey, come to the White House, explain these issues now. You get on a plane, you get over there, and they're like, explain it. And then they'll debate it. That's like, it's totally different.
Sorry, devil's advocate. Should being a mega donor, I mean, I guess I get your point of view, but couldn't it also just be like, no, we're not going to be biased just because a person donated money. We're not going to just answer the phone whenever he calls.
You think I was like, you know, stupid 5 years ago and all of a sudden tried to like start to build national champions like now? Yeah. Dude, man, I've been in the grind for fucking 25 years here, paying my taxes. I fucking paid, you know, more than most people.
Yeah, so irrespective of the donation,
I've been trying to do the right thing.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to favor myself. It's like even just to explain, like, here's what's happening on the ground. Do you want to know?
I wasn't asking for favors for my friends. Okay, I was just trying to like, you know, clue them in on what was going on, dude.
Well, I actually do think what Trump is working through is deal by deal patronage based on how he sees the company. I'm sorry, the other country.
That's not what happened.
That's literally what happened. That's definitionally, that is exactly what you described verbatim.
Sir, can I just make sure that this is clear to you? This is a 150-year-old American business. I have no interest in that company except a friendship.
Why couldn't they go themselves then? If they're such an important American business, why couldn't they go themselves?
These are Americans hiring Americans trying to compete with China who were very negatively affected. And all I said was, why don't you have a chance to explain what's happening on the ground? My point that I was trying to make, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough, so let me set the record straight. The Trump administration, what I have seen as a businessman, is willing to hear the conditions on the ground. As a businessman, when I was building, Ezra, just to be clear, critical rare earth supplies for America under the Biden administration, battery can materials to compete with China under the Biden administration, AI chips to be the best inference solution under the Biden administration, I couldn't get a call back. That's just the facts. Not because I wanted anything, just to tell them what was going on.
So fair
that is
enough.
Insane.
Okay, fair enough.
It's not fair
I am
enough.
not telling you that the Biden administration should never return your calls. What I am saying is that the degree to which Trump first, and then everybody around him as an example of him, because culture comes from the top, is working off this kind of individual call and deal making worries me, because I believe that you had every one of these calls you're saying, and they went exactly the way you say they went. And then the calls that you are not getting, and they
2
are,
minutes ago, Ezra, you were saying that a 10% across the board tariff was too broad, and we need to go industry by industry. And now you're saying that it's going to be too particular, and he shouldn't do country by country negotiations.
The word deal.
There is a different. Oh my God, dude! Wow. Okay, this David Sachs guy is a fucking retard. Is this one of the guys that all the crypto bros cite as being an intelligent dude? Like, hey, I don't think putting tariffs across the entire fucking market in every industry is a good idea. Okay, fine. Also, I don't think it's good that like individuals can go and petition the government for tariff relief. Interesting. So you don't like broad tariffs, but but you don't like it when individuals can get the government to give them individual reprieve. What do you want then? How about sector-specific tariffs? Is that there's no middle ground there? It's either open corruption or the sledgehammering to the entire American global trade?
Deal making, listening to people is not deal making, Ezra. It's just listening to people.
Are you really going to be here and tell me that the way Trump himself works is not individual deal making with countries, with people, with Eric Adams? Is this really the argument here?
I will tell you what I've seen, and David's seen much more. What I have seen from the president is he takes in hundreds of opinions and starts to figure out what the ground truth is. And the reason is when you only listen to one or two, every president probably deals with this. You have this information asymmetry problem because you are the president of the United States. And so how do you cut through it? You talk to hundreds and hundreds of people and you triangulate what the truth is. So
yeah. Who was triangulating our current tariffs? Where did that come from?
It's not like he's giving any favor. He's collecting information. That is a good process. You want the most powerful person in the world to get to the ground truth.
Go ahead, Larry.
I am all for information gathering. I agree that the Biden administration did not do as good a job as it could have of maintaining relations with the business community. I agree that it's a good idea for there to be quite extensive connection. I am also appalled by the half dozen phone calls I have gotten from prominent people in business who have said, I'm used to being shaken down when I try to do business in some parts of the world. It's a new experience to be shaken down by representatives of the President of the United States.
What's the shakedown?
And when you have...
Fuck you. What a fucking moron, dude. God, I hate these fucking people. Ugh.
Close connections. You help us. You contribute this way. You
that
do
makes no
this.
sense at all.
Makes no sense,
What
Larry.
the president has been trying to do is encourage domestic investment.
Maybe it is an erroneous perception to which I have been exposed repeatedly. But it is a pervasive.
Total nonsense.
You guys are very confident that your anecdotes are true and everybody else's aren't.
Yeah. It is a perception that is shared by almost everyone who has experience in the conflict of interest area, who has looked at the situation of Trump administration officials and those working as special government employees in the Trump administration.
What are you saying? Because I just went through that whole process, Larry. What does that mean?
It may all be false, but
I can speak to this because I just went through this process. It took forever. It took like months. Okay. I went through the same process everyone else goes through. The OGE career staff have to go through all of your disclosures and they figure out what the conflicts are, and then you have to divest them. Okay. It's the same process everyone goes through. So you're all over the place making all sorts of accusations here. So if you have some proof or you want to accuse someone, then why don't you just do it? But otherwise, what you're saying is just not true. It's not backed up by anything.
Great. They shook down Eric Adams. That's a direct accusation that happened in public. They shook down Eric Adams because he put him in his pocket. That's a big deal, y'all.
Oh, dude, Ezra just got fucking obliterated. Oh, he just got fucking annihilated. He did the secret strategy. He did the thing. I give debate lessons to all sides here, okay? MAGA, this is your killer argument, okay? He just brought up something that you can't pivot out of. You can't post hoc rationalize. There's no way to back and forth on it. And you seem like you're fucked, but there's always a way out, okay? And the secret way out is always to just say, I don't know anything about that.
That's a direct accusation that happened in public. They shook down Eric Adams because he put him in his pocket. That's a big deal, y'all. Like, that is the way they are doing business here.
You guys are all over the map making wild accusations.
Oh my God, dude. You asked him, and look at the pattern. Look at how this conversation just went, right? He said, if you want to make a specific accusation, then make one. Oh, okay. Eric Adams was absolutely open corruption. Yeah. I don't know anything about that, and you're all over the map now, bro. I don't even know what you're talking about. You're everywhere right now, bro. Eric, who? What?
First it was...
There have been a variety of OGE resignations because of their discomfort with being overruled by your colleagues in the Trump administration. So the suggestion that you have been held to the same ethical standards that I was held and that other members of previous administrations, including the Bush administration, were held, unfortunately is not right.
No, that's false.
All right, well, there's two issues here. We're talking about...
Told you, Eric Adams will be the next mayor of New York City. Here's why he won.
Ways from this. Number one, crime is the issue that I've been...
Tweeted from David Sachs. Huh. Maybe he forgot who he was.
Been saying on this pod that it is for at least 6 months. It is the number one issue when people do not feel safe in their homes and in their neighborhoods. Nothing else matters. And here comes this really underdog candidate. He's only a former cop. He still carries a gun. I mean, he is hacking. And that sent a message to the electorate. I'm going to be tough on crime. I'm not standing for defunding the police and deprosecution and decarceration, which are the hobby horses right now in the progressive left. I'm going to protect you and the city and the voters. We're eating it up, even in the Democratic Party. Number two, it showed how out of touch the sort of progressives that I'd say predominantly white are with the constituencies they claim to represent. The mostly black and Latino neighborhoods who voted in large numbers for Eric Adams were having none of this sort of elite, woke, progressive progressive thinking around decarceration. They are interested in real solutions for the problems that they see, not engaging in this sort of like socialism. The final point that I think the Eric Adams win represents is that Twitter is not real life. Eric Adams has 14,000 Twitter followers. Yang has 2 million. Okay, Yang came in fourth. Eric Adams had another great quote, I think, on election night. He said, social media does not pick a candidate. People on social security pick a candidate. And so here's the thing is I think we all are distorted in our thinking based on what this very loud, but ultimately small number of voices on social media says. I think the Eric Adams win is a watershed because it shows the emperor wears no clothes. These very loud, progressive, woke voices ultimately do not have that many supporters, and all people have to do is stop listening to them. And we've just seen that Eric...
Crazy. Who is that? Who's Eric Adams? What? Because they know, and remember when he says that, what he's saying is that I know that the actions of the administration regarding this are indefensible. I actually can't even invent a reason why it would be defensible. So you just pretend to not know. There's no fucking idea.
We're talking about two different things.
Hold on, I had to divest a lot, as I talked about on the show.
Yes,
in any event, you guys are all over the map making wild accusations. 2 seconds ago, the shakedown was at the level of companies. Then all of a sudden, it was OGE and ethics. Then it was something about Eric Adams. You guys are just making shit up.
Nobody's making. I like that you're like, who's Eric Adams? We're not making.
No, I know who Eric Adams is. I supported him on this show.
It's a
I know who he is.
straightforward way that Trump does business at every level at which he operates, and so it is happening at every level of his administration.
I know you don't want to hear it, but
no, it's not that I don't want to hear it.
You know how this started is because Ezra quoted. Hold on a second, Ezra, you misquoted something Jamal said on another podcast, where all he said was that I can get my phone calls returned by this White House.
That's not all he said. He said that he can make phone calls to the White House and that he can petition on behalf of his fucking friends to get them reprieve from tariffs. That's called corruption. That's just corruption. It's like that's the most lefty, tanky, strawman version of lobbying, except it actually is happening now. That's what that is.
I couldn't with Obama or Biden, even though I was a big donor. Hold on. And you guys have somehow morphed that into some sort of like broad-ranging accusations of corruption or something like that.
I think I'm being very clear about what the accusation of the way Donald Trump works is.
Ezra, your accusation of me tried to infer some form of corruption or some form of deal-making. None of that happened. Again, I'll tell you. I connected the White House so they could hear on the ground what's happening from a company who was very negatively impacted by the tariff so that they had the complexion of that feedback as well. Okay?
Do you deny the possibility that your experience with the Trump administration might be different than people who they feel are less allied to them than you are?
Ezra, I'm willing to...
It's a straightforward question. Are you sure that you're a good sample?
I don't even know what we're talking about anymore.
Oh my God. They're retards, dude. Why? But somebody asked yesterday about how I would feel about a technocracy or whatever. Dude, it just doesn't work, I guess. I don't understand how people's intelligence can be so narrowly confined to one particular subject and you can actually be so fucking retarded everywhere else. What the fuck? And what's more, people can't see it. I don't know what we're talking about right now. Why the fuck are you even on this show, you fucking retard? Bring in another co-host for today. If you're not equipped to talk about literally any of the issues that are at, like, play here, then bring in somebody else that actually can have the fucking discussion. Sorry.
I think what we're talking about right now is that people who donate to politicians have unique access to politicians. I think we can all agree
that's not true. Okay, just to be very clear, I have given.
He just said, who gave that? No, he literally just said, your co-host just said, no, I donated to Obama and I didn't get the corrupt access that I wanted. So no, that's not true.
Two politicians have unique access to politicians. I think we can all agree
that's not true. Okay, just to be very clear, I have given way more to the Democrats than I've given to Donald Trump.
And you were disappointed about that.
I didn't say anything about your donations. I said about where you're allied now.
And by the way, like what's crazy is I was the same intellectual person I was under Biden that I am under Trump. It's just that it seems like the Trump administration is like, well, this is a smart guy with some opinions. Let me listen. Biden, and by the way, and Larry, you know this. These are some very close friends of ours that we share mutually that would not even return my calls. So it is a little personal for me as well, Ezra, just to be honest with you. I'm not going to go there, but the point is,
that's fair.
I have never seen a single iota of any form of anything other than just gathering information from the Trump. They've never asked me for anything. They've never tried to direct me to do anything. They just want to know what's going on. When you ask them, hey, can you talk to such and such a person?
I can assure you that your experience is not the experience of quite a number of the nation's major law firms. It is not the experience of quite a number of the nation's business leaders. It is not the experience of quite a number of the nation's universities.
Yep. And look at this guy. Yes. Wow. Larry Summers. I thought he was just an econ guy, but look at him knowing so many different things. Columbia University was deprived of $400 million for what? DEI? Whatever the fuck that means. We've had several law firms at this point. Over $500 million of pro bono services have been delivered now to the Trump administration in order for reprieve from executive orders targeting these law firms for no valid reason. You've got corporations that are begging and pleading Trump for reprieve on some of these tariffs now, right? Like, yes, across every single domain. You can pretend not to know about anything, but
neither the first nor the 100th person referencing efforts at extortion to use the movie The Godfather as a metaphor for aspects of the way in which our country is being governed.
What a surprise. Democratic universities and Democratic law firms are making accusations.
Bro, dude, I can't say it. I hate fucking YouTube. We're gonna start doing kick-only streams. No, because I'll get canceled literally everywhere. Actually, he's actually so evil and disgusting. Like, holy shit, he's like actually an evil fucking person.
All right, let's move on. We think we've
I can't. Ezra, fuck Ezra. I'm sorry, Ezra. I love you. Ezra shouldn't let that stand. This is open corruption. It's just open. It's out in the open. We have executive orders targeting law firms. We have law firms donating pro bono work now to the Trump administration to get reprieve from these EOs. And then we have Trump bragging about it. Like, it's open corruption.
The tariff issue, and I think we can all agree that if you donate money, you might have better access to politicians. I want to talk about the future.
Especially, Jason, if you give 10% to the big guy, then you really get access.
Oh, and I can't. I hope it does, though. God, it would just be so... God, it would feel... Oh, my God. Every day I hate Luigi more. Just because of... How, there are other worlds. God, dude, I actually can't even believe how disgusting this fucking subhuman piece of shit is.
Listen, we could do these allegations all day long. If there's a long list of people who've made donations, and there's a long list of favorable things that have happened to them across all administrations, and we can debate cause and correlation all day long here. But I wanted to talk about the future of the Democratic Party while we're here. Ezra, you have been on a tour talking about exactly how incompetent, how terrible of a campaign they ran.
Oh yeah, let's shit on the Dems now. Ha 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 ha.
Is the future, and I'll let Larry get his 2 cents in here as well. Is there any saving this party, and if so, what would it look like?
Well, there's the problem of the party and the campaign. Let me bracket that, because my book Abundance is more about how Democrats govern at both the state and local and federal level, and some of the pathologies of governance there. They make it hard for liberals to achieve their goals. There are versions of this on the right, but I'm not really writing about that in this. So my book Abundance, Derek Thompson, is about the tendency Democrats have to subsidize things where they're choking off the supply of the thing they want people to have more of. So think about housing in California. You get rental vouchers from the federal government, but we make it incredibly hard to build homes. Clean energy, which a lot of the Biden administration's policies were about putting huge subsidies behind the building of more clean energy, but they didn't really do anything to make the permitting, the siting, the state capacity to do all of that capable of building that amount of clean energy at the pace they foresaw us building it, right? That they wanted us to build it. And behind this, and I can sort of go into a lot of detail here, but is a diminishment of state capacity that comes from wrapping the state itself in red tape and regulation. I think we think and have an intuitive way of thinking about the idea of deregulation on the private sector, right? When the government is imposing regulations on private companies and it's making it hard for those companies to act, to do business, et cetera. But this happens first and foremost on the government itself. One of my favorite examples I've been using lately, there's a new RAND report that looks at how much it costs to construct a square foot of housing in California, in Texas, and Colorado. And it does it on 2 kinds of housing, market rate, and it does it on affordable housing subsidized by the public sector. And the cost of creating housing in California, market rate, is 2x in California what it is in Texas. But when you get into that publicly subsidized housing, where you have all these new standards and rules and regulations being triggered by the addition of public money, it goes up to about 4.4x. And so you have this real problem, I think, in a way of governing that evolved in the 70s, the 80s. There's a kind of small government version of the Democratic Party, the new left, more individualistic, that was worried about too much exercise of government power. And now that we are in a different world with different problems, we're thinking about reindustrializing, we have a housing shortage, and you have things like the Biden administration, which really are thinking about how to build a lot more in America, but you don't have either a policy architecture or, I would say, a governing culture that makes that possible.
Yeah, and so a lot of this came from Francis Fukuyama, I think, and Votocracy.
Yeah,
how do you pronounce this?
Fukuyama is a great sort of related concept of Vetocracy, which is that.
Vetocracy,
but he also got another great concept since we're bringing up Fukuyama, which is that neoliberalism, which we've sort of been talking about here with the WT and other things, he says people think about it as the veneration of the market. But what it is, first and foremost, is the degradation of the state. And I think that explains a lot more about the world we're in than people recognize.
Ezra, you can agree with this. Francis Fukuyama is probably one of the most polarizing modern academics in America. As you read him, people end up they're very pro Fukuyama or they think Fukuyama is insane.
Yeah, I mean, look, because what happened is, just to up-level this for a second, is that you had Fukuyama write The End of History, which basically said that democratic capitalism is the end-all be-all, and we're basically down to one system, and the whole world's going to run on that system. And that philosophy then animated, I would say, a neoliberal and neoconservative consensus in Washington for 25 years. And there were 3 key pillars of that, let's call it globalist consensus. Number 1, we'd have open borders, free flow of labor. In fact, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is considered to be conservative, actually supported a constitutional amendment saying that we'd have open borders. Number 2, we'd have open flows of trade and capital, so basically the unfettered free trade agenda. And then number 3, the third leg of it, was Pax Americana. We'd deploy American troops all over the world to defend this consensus because they'd be greeted as liberators, not occupiers. I think all 3 pillars have been refuted. And the person who has represented the shift in this consensus to, I say, a new agenda of economic nationalism and geopolitical nationalism is Donald Trump. Okay?
Wow, I was going to guess that.
Now, when you have, listen, when you have
so this is
bipartisan consensus,
violence. End of History and The Last Man is a much more complicated book.
Let me take it at a very high level. Let me finish the point here, because I'm kind of on a roll here.
Yeah, keep wrapping around. Bring it home.
When you have a bipartisan consensus that included both Bush Republicans and Clinton Democrats around these 3 pillars of globalism, and then I'd say that country turns against that, that's not going to be a smooth process. That is going to be potentially a violent process. It's going to be a disruptive process. And you guys want to raise like all these nitpicky objections and process or whatever. Donald Trump is bringing that realignment. But the real question is, was that consensus correct or was it a failure? I would argue it was a failure.
Larry, let me ask you a question then. When you see something like Doge happening and people start taking a bit of a more unilateral, a quicker, a less veto-based approach, is that encouraging to you, Larry? Do you think that's the right way to do it? Because we haven't been able to get the government smaller since Clinton. So are you pro-Doge, not Doge? And do you think this sort of objection to, hey, we're going too fast, too violently, maybe that's what we need to do at times? And then I'll go back to you, Ezra, to answer the same question.
I think that Ezra is broadly right about the promiscuous distribution of the veto power. He's broadly right that we need to be able to do more things more quickly in the state if we're to be an effective government. I think we need much more reform. I think Democrats have allowed themselves excessively to become hostage to particular groups, particular traditional concerns, and have lost touch in important ways with an American mainstream. And I think that insofar as the election outcomes in recent years have not been what they wanted, that is an important contribution to how that has happened. And I agree with David that Donald Trump represents a transformative and profoundly different ideology than has been present in governing America before. I do believe that it is fundamentally not new under the sun, just new in America. That it is the Juan Perón approach, which is very familiar to students of Latin American history in particular, and that the general experience of that approach is that its leaders, particularly when they have galvanizing personalities, can be very popular for a substantial period of time, but that they are very rarely remembered well by historians of their countries. And so my best judgment is that this project is going to end in disastrous failure, despite having put its finger on some important concerns and issues. Of course, there should be much more aggressive reform of the government than there is, but that does not excuse or mean that it is likely to work out well for some of the mindless savagery that the Doge is bringing to traditional American institutions is going to work out well. And to take just one example, my belief is that the revenue loss from the Doge's destruction of significant part of the functioning of our nation's tax collection system is likely to exceed.
True, because how the fuck are we going to balance anything? Oh, God, he's right. He's just right. I know he's right. Thank you. Whoever this Larry guy is, I don't know if he's conservative or not. Okay. He knows just basic things. And at this point, I appreciate that. Whatever money Doge is going to save, which is going to be nothing by the end of the day, it's destroyed by, on its own, the raise that Trump is looking for the Pentagon, or on its own, the reduction in revenues collected from their attacks on the IRS. It's true. There's like 15 different ways that the money they even claim they're going to raise now, it will be lost. And
in terms of contributing more to the deficit than any savings that is successfully realized.
What do you mean by that? What is they've identified the right thing, but they're executing on it too much? Go ahead, Jamal.
No, I have two questions, Larry. Just tactically, what do you mean by the destruction of the revenue collecting mechanism? That's question number one, which was I just want to understand what you meant. The second question, which is more broadly, Larry, if you were president for a day, just give us the Larry Summers plan. Like, what is the counterfactual to what's happening now? You can include tariffs, you can include Doge. I just want to understand how you would frame the solution to what ails us. So maybe tactically just talk about the collections part because you referenced it, and then just more strategically what the Larry Summers 2.0 plan is.
We are firing en masse people whose job it is to audit people like you. And the result of that is that we are losing revenue directly. We are losing revenue further because people once audited go straight in subsequent years. And we are losing revenue because more and more people are playing the audit lottery, engaging in problematic practices.
I was so close to doing this, but I didn't. And I'm a good American taxpayer, okay? But you gotta, holy fuck, it is tempting to just cheat the fuck out of taxes right now because it's the Trump admin and fuck this, all this bullshit.
In the expectation
Can I burst your bubble on this?
that they will not, that they will not be caught.
Let me tell you my experience. I get audited every year automatically. And the reason you get audited every single year is typically the way that you acquire your wealth creates complexity. 700, 800, 900 page tax filings. Now, you don't do that yourself. What happens is you typically pay a large Big Four accounting firm millions of dollars to do it. Deloitte, PwC, Anderson, etc. Every year that I've been audited, the biggest delta has been about $1,000. In this case, I actually was owed $1,000 by the U.S. government last year.
What'd you spend it on? Incredible.
I'll spend it everywhere. So, Larry, just so you know,
I'm well aware of everything you just said, and I have
what a stupid fucking point to bring up. Because of the massive amount of money I make, when I get audited, the delta, so he's bringing up like, what's the difference between what the IRS says I owe and what I say I owe? It's only $1,000. Oh, well, in that case, we should just stop auditing, right? The whole reason why that delta is so small is probably because you get audited every year. You're telling me that you wouldn't be tempted to cheat a little bit, or that nobody would be tempted to change a little bit if they knew there was some percentage chance? Like you could literally price in cheating at that point, right? Let's say I have a 10% chance of getting audited. Okay, well, if I have a 10% chance of getting audited and I know that there's some fee or fine attached to cheating my taxes, like I could actually calculate in what would make sense to cheat every single year, knowing that there's just this percentage chance of me getting caught on this.
No doubt about your personal integrity.
It's not the honeypot you think it is.
Less than a quarter of people with incomes over $10 million are audited. So it's just not true.
Let me ask you a question.
It's not true that everybody is audited.
I get the sense, Larry, you like Doge, but you don't like the execution. Got it. Ezra, you talk about your book. We got to move faster. We got to do things faster. We got to take more risk. So are you pro Doge or not? And if you look at this administration, I'm going to call it